Chapter 11:13. I'm really sorry. Let's wait for a while. Let's wait until I'm mentally prepared. After thinking for a while, she opened her eyes and saw that all the girls were still seated, but Dugu Xiaoyi was nowhere to be found. She had obviously gone to call Guan Qinghan. Everyone, let's not wait for them. Let's eat first, Mei Xian said vaguely. I reckon that Xiao, you won't be able to come back this time. Why? Is Sister Qinghan very sick? Did she infect Xiao Yi? Han Yiming opened her eyes wide innocently. Cough, cough, infect? You can't say that it's completely wrong. Mei Shuiyan's face turned red, and she said awkwardly, if I'm not wrong, Xia must have slept in Sister Qinghan's room last night. All the girls were stunned. Then their expressions changed. At this moment, all of them had the same thought in their hearts. When we see Qinghan, we must ask her for advice. Why does she always get Mo Xia's favor? Where does he go to? What's going on? This thought was especially urgent in Mei Shuiyan's heart. Guan Qinghan's physique isn't as strong as mine, but how can she endure it? This is really a strange thing. After a quick meal, all the girls dispersed. Dugu Xiaoyi really didn't come back. As for Mei Shuiyan, she almost ran away. Mei Shuiyan felt that she had never been so scared in her life. Meanwhile, Dugu Xiaoyi was skipping towards Guan Qinghan's Qinghan residence. She arrived after turning a corner. Actually, it wasn't that far away. But, with the support of Jun Daxiao's power of earth, the soundproofing of each room was very good. She knocked on the door a few times, but there wasn't any sound from inside. Could it be that he's sleeping so soundly? Dugu Xiaoyi bit her lips, and a trace of panic flashed across her eyes. Could something have happened? As she thought of this, she immediately knocked on the door repeatedly. Jun Daxiao had spent the entire night on the expedition, and it could be said that he was very happy. He had only rested for a short while, but he felt that his spirit had completely recovered. It was morning, and it was naturally the time when a man's yang energy was at its peak. However, the beauty beside him was still snoring, and Guan Qinghan, who never snored, was actually snoring softly. It seemed that Iren was really exhausted last night. The current Guan Qinghan seemed to be unable to bear it any longer. The wolf, who was still not satisfied, sighed helplessly. He crossed his hands behind his head and thought, I'll just lie down like this for a while. So be it. Who asked you to be so powerful? Just as he was feeling bored and helpless, there was a sudden knock on the door. Jun Moxie scanned with his divine sense and found that it was actually Dugu Xiaoyi outside. She was anxiously knocking on the door. Jun Daxiao couldn't help but roll his eyes. He immediately used the yin-yang escape and turned his body into nothingness. In this way, it seemed that only Guan Qinghan was sleeping on the bed. Then he stretched out his hand, and the door automatically opened a gap without a sound. Dugu Xiaoyi knocked on the door for a long time, and she became more and more anxious. She simply pushed the door hard, thinking that if there was still no movement, she could only break the door. Unexpectedly, when she pushed hard, she suddenly pushed empty air. She actually went straight through the door. The door actually wasn't closed. Dugu Xiaoyi blinked her eyes in astonishment, and then looked at the bed. At this moment, Guan Qinghan was sleeping very soundly, like a crabapple in the spring. She actually still hasn't woken up, Dugu Xiaoyi said to herself. She hurriedly closed the door. It wouldn't be good if someone else saw them. She couldn't help but grumble in her heart. Big sister Qinghan actually didn't close the door when she was sleeping. She was too careless. Then, she wrinkled her little nose and asked, What is this smell? Why is it so strange? It smells terrible. But this girl was used to being careless, so she didn't think much about it. She took a step to the bed and said, Big sister Qinghan, why are you still sleeping at this time? We are all waiting for you to eat breakfast. Unexpectedly, Guan Qinghan didn't hear her, and she continued to lightly snore. Dugu Xiaoyi frowned and reached out to lift the quilt. She said angrily, Big sister Qinghan, wake up and eat. Suddenly, she screamed, and her pretty eyes widened. Guan Qinghan, who was under the quilt, was actually completely naked. Could it be a rapist? Once this horrifying thought appeared in her mind, Dugu Xiaoyi's face instantly turned pale. She looked around in panic, and, after confirming that there was no one else in the room, She took a big stride to the door and looked outside cautiously. Then, she closed the door and bolted it. After thinking for a while, she was still worried, so she simply moved a chair to block the door. After all, if Guan Qinghan was really raped by a rapist, she definitely couldn't let outsiders know. This matter was too serious. If it was spread out, how would Big Sister Qinghan live? And Xia, his head would be chopped off? It had to be said that this little girl's thoughts were indeed very careless and jumpy. There were a few women living here, and among them were a few saint venerables. The lowest cultivation level of the other women was at least at the saint level. Which rapist would have the guts to come here and pick flowers? Even if they had the guts, they would need to have the ability to do so. Big Sister Qinghan, Dugu Xiaoi, sat on the edge of the bed, her face full of worry and sorrow. What happened to you, Big Sister Qinghan? Before she could finish her sentence, she was suddenly hugged by the waist, and an evil laugh could be heard. Don't shout. Your big sister Qinghan has been cooked by me. Dugu Xiaoi suddenly screamed, and her soul almost left her body. Her first reaction was to use the self-defense technique that Jun Daxiao had personally taught her. Just as she was about to use it, she turned around and saw Jun Moxie's despicable smile. Her heart instantly relaxed. Since he was here, the culprit must be him. Then, she came back to her senses and patted her chest in relief. I was scared to death. I was scared to death. I thought it was something else. Jun Moxie raised his eyebrows. Cough, cough, cough. It's good that you're fine. It's good that you're fine. The little girl's eyes flickered. She laughed dryly and said, Since there's nothing else, I'll go back to eat. I haven't had breakfast yet. I've been thinking of calling you Big Sister Qinghan. After saying that, she drooped her head as if she was a little disappointed and walked out listlessly. Why? You don't want to cook any more? Jun Moxie chuckled. He held the little girl's shoulder from behind, and his warm breath blew into the little girl's delicate ears. Of course I want to. Why wouldn't I want to? I want to do it even in my dreams now. The little girl's eyes immediately lit up, and a pair of cute little canine teeth also showed. She suddenly said what was on her mind. Unexpectedly, when she turned around, she found that Jun Daxiao was actually naked. She couldn't help but blush, and she rolled her eyes and said disappointedly, But you can't do it. The little girl was still at the stage of understanding this kind of thing, but she also knew that it seemed like she couldn't do it after that. I can't do it. Who said I can't do it? Jun Daxiao's face was full of black lines. This was simply the biggest provocation to a man. The biggest humiliation for a man, a naked insult. It was when others said that he couldn't do it, especially when women said that he couldn't do it in that aspect. Especially when it was in the morning, when he was full of yang energy, when he was like a pillar supporting the heavens, and a woman said that he couldn't do it. It was really intolerable. He had to prove himself. He had to prove it with his actions. For a moment, Jun Daxiao's anger rose from his heart, and his courage grew. He hugged the little girl and said fiercely, Little girl, don't you want to cook? This young master will fulfill your wish today and let you see whether I can do it or not. As he said that, he kissed her. Dugu Xiaoi failed to cook last time, and instead, Guan Qinghan took advantage of it. She was already indignant, and she didn't know how many times she had scolded herself for being too timid. Seeing that all the latecomers had come to cook before her, it could be said that the little girl couldn't hold it in any longer. Then, she looked at Miao Xiao Miao, who was the last to arrive and had actually cooked earlier than her. It seemed that she had done it many times. The little girl was so jealous that her heart was about to explode. The first wife was supposed to be me, boo-hoo, but now one wrong step had led to many wrong steps, and it had dragged on until now. His position had also gradually slipped from the first place to the third and fourth place. This kind of awkward position, it was really intolerable. Now that she had such a heaven-sent opportunity, Dugu Xiaoi had a feeling of joy in her heart, as if she was finally going to cook him for real. She didn't even have the slightest intention to resist, and even went along with the flow, adding fuel to the fire to welcome him. She secretly made up her mind No matter what, I can't escape this time. I must cook the rice. It had to be said that the little girl was very determined this time, and she was also very bold. But then, she felt that something was wrong. Do I cook here? Sister Ching-han is still here. The little girl only thought of this problem now, but her clothes had already left her body. It's okay. Your sister Ching-han is asleep. She can't see or hear anything. Can't you see how soundly she is sleeping? Jun Moxie laughed strangely. His hands and mouth didn't stop. How could he not eat such a beauty who had delivered herself to his doorstep? But, Dugu Xiao, he didn't have the time to object when her small mouth was suddenly blocked. Then, her head suddenly shook, and a strange feeling rose up. Suddenly, she felt very dizzy and didn't know what was going on. Dugu Xiao pushed Jun Moxie with all her might, and her pretty big eyes were filled with tears like a fountain. It hurts. Get out quickly. It hurts. It doesn't hurt, be good. It won't hurt anymore, and you will feel better later. Jun Moxie hurriedly stayed still. Ahem. I won't write here. I'll omit 100,000 words. After a long time, Dugu Xiao's first time seemed to be even more miserable than Guan Qing Han. In the end, although Jun Daxiao didn't enjoy himself to his heart's content, he could only let her go. He actually didn't enjoy himself to his heart's content. A certain wolf was really overbearing. When Guan Qing Han woke up from her slumber, she felt her entire body aching. Her entire body was filled with a strange feeling as if she was riding on clouds and mist, causing her to feel as if everything around her was so unreal. When she opened her eyes, she found that something was wrong. Why were there so many people around her? Why was Xiaoi here too? Chapter 11:14. If he hadn't met Jun Moxie, he would at most be in the Earth Xian realm. In fact, he would have died a long time ago and turned into ashes. How could he talk about marrying and having children? But ever since he met Jun Moxie, he had transformed from an illegitimate child that even his own family despised into a person who had the ability to influence the entire world in a short period of time. All of his dreams came true one by one. Zhan Meng Dai, the young mistress who was in love with him, finally became his wife. Before this, even the entire Bailey family was not much stronger than an ant in the eyes of the Zhan family. At most, they were just slightly stronger. How could they have the right to touch the pearl of the Zhan family? All of this was brought to him by Jun Moxie. Bailey Luo Yin repeated this to himself countless times in his heart. A gentleman would die for his bosom friend. With Tian Can and DK's talent, they had consumed the bone-tempering pill and marrow-cleansing pill in the past 3 days. Then, with the help of all sorts of miraculous medicine, they had completed the process of being reborn. However, the pain he felt was truly inhumane torture. But these two little fellows had persevered. Currently, their meridians had already returned to a state of limitless emptiness. They were like a bottomless dry pond, just waiting for water to pour in and create waves. And right now, Jun Moxie was doing something similar to pouring water into their meridians. Jun Moxie was absolutely confident that these two little fellows would bring an incomparable shock to the entire world the moment they fully matured and completed their metamorphosis. The heavens would be destroyed. The earth would be lacking. Now that the two little fellows had completed their training, their experience, wisdom, and determination would only be stronger than normal people. So Jun Moxie decided to raise their cultivation level in one go. But there was one thing that Jun Moxie still did not understand. This world was Xin Qi, not Qi. The Hongjun Pagoda's pill formula stated clearly. After one's cultivation reached a certain level, one must not use pills to raise their cultivation level. Otherwise, his soul would be destroyed at the most critical moment of the heavenly tribulation. There is absolutely no chance of him getting lucky. Even before that, he had to put in a certain amount of effort first, and then use the help of medicinal pills to advance. However, Jun Moxie had already done a lot of things for his subordinates. Hence, he couldn't just focus on increasing his strength in the future. Furthermore, the pill recipe stated that after reaching the soul formation stage, one definitely couldn't use pills to increase one's strength. But the problem was, Jun Moxie didn't know at all what realm of profound energy in this world was considered the soul formation stage. This made June Moxie very distressed and depressed. June Moxie wasn't afraid of the heavenly tribulation, but that didn't mean everyone was. Even someone as powerful as Miao Ching Chung had to hide under the Misty Mansion for thousands of years under the threat of the heavenly tribulation, not to mention others. Therefore, June Mo Xie was acting as if he was treading on thin ice. Therefore, June Moxie planned to help all those with potential. The upper echelons would at most reach the Saint Venerable stage, and the middle echelons would reach the Holy Emperor stage. After that, it would be up to their own efforts. Whatever realm they could reach, that was what realm they could reach. He must not forcefully raise their cultivation level. Now, June Moxie picked out a few types of pills: Spirit Refining Pill, Heaven Mending Pill, Immortal Dew Pill, Diamond Pill, Eastern Spirit Pill. These 5 pills were basically not for raising cultivation, but to refine the soul, condense the divine sense, and strengthen the body. After taking the last 4 pills, and then taking the Spirit Refining Pill, the person who took the pill would feel an overwhelming pain, and this pain would last for 18 days. There was a saying, the 18 refinements of the soul, transcending the 18 levels of hell. In other words, after going through the strengthening and transformation of the Spirit Refining Pill, the soul would condense, and even if one died, the soul would not be destroyed. Of course, this referred to normal death, not death by the heavenly tribulation. But after the soul was strengthened, the confidence to resist the heavenly tribulation would also increase. But this kind of pill could only be taken by experts at the level of the Holy Emperor and above. If one's cultivation level was not high enough, the soul might directly be destroyed in this endless pain, but the rest was not something that June Moxie could care about. For the upper echelons, June Moxie could only do so much. At least in this world, what June Moxie had done was already the limit. If he forced his subordinates to improve, he still had the ability to do so, but that would only cause them to encounter the critical heavenly tribulation earlier and die early. There was no other use. And this time, the extra pill obtained from refining the pill was Slimming Pill. All the other pills had ready-made original recipes, but this pill tailored for fatty had to be explored by June Dashao himself. In the 5 days of refining the pill, he had refined 5 kinds of pills, but from the experimental results, it was obvious that they had all failed. It was too tragic. And in those 5 days, Fatty Tang was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. He was truly in a state where he would rather die than live, because he was the test subject, and the only test subject at that. After taking the first pill, Fatty's effects were quite obvious. Within half a day, he had crazy diarrhea 21 times. In the end, it had developed to the point where his buttocks would hurt like hell just by wiping it. But the effect, after lying in bed for a day, he took the second pill. He no longer had diarrhea, but he had a splitting headache. After taking the third pill, Fatty's symptoms were quite obvious. He was sweating profusely. June Moxie thought that it was effective, so he gave him another pill. This time, Tang Yuan was sweating so much that he was dehydrated 3 times in a day. If not for June Moxie directly using the power of water on Fatty, he might have lost his life. As for the effect of the 4th pill, it was even more strange. After Fatty took it, he let out a strange cry, and his whole body cramped. The cramps were so severe that one of his ears was on the top of his head, all the way to his chin. His upper lip was cracked to his temples, and his lower lip was crooked to his shoulders. Even his nostrils were almost completely separated. Fatty squealed like a pig being slaughtered for an entire day and night. Unable to bear it any longer, he swore to go on strike, and even swore to the heavens that he would cut off all ties with June Moxie and not treat him even if he was beaten to death. But he was caught by June Dashao, who gave him a pill to recover. Then he pinched his nose and forced the 5th pill down his throat. After taking the 5th pill, the effects were extremely obvious. Fatty Tang's hair stood up straight on his head, and all his muscles started to dance. His digestive system was in a mess, and he could fart 5 to 6 times with every step he took. It was loud and smelly. In an instant, The entire evil monarch manor was filled with a foul stench, and everyone covered their noses and ran away. Jun Moxie furrowed his brows in deep thought as he entered Tang Yuan's room once again. Fatty Tang, who was originally in a weak and listless state, instantly sprang up like a spring when he saw Jun Daxiao. He roared angrily, "Get out! Scram! Who allowed you to come in? Let me go back. I want to go back to Tianxiang. I want to go home, woo-woo-woo. I want to go home." Fatty started to cry bitterly, snot and tears flowing down his face. It was as if all the offending he'd suffered in his entire life had been concentrated in these few days, and it was even more severe by several times. It was too painful. If not for the miraculous pills that Jun Moxie had, Fatty would have died over 100 times in these few days. He really couldn't take it anymore. Fatty, don't be afraid. Big brother, I have developed a new type of pill. This pill is definitely a slimming pill specially made for you. It will definitely be effective after you consume it, and the effects will definitely be excellent. Believe me, I'm right. Jun Moxie said with a smile. Pooey, you still want me to believe you? Scram. F***CK. Do you even believe what you're saying? F***CK. Fatty Tang scolded loudly. You've F***king said this to me 5 times already. Give me hope. Let me have hope. Disappoint me. Make me despair. I have no more hope. You've grown more capable. Tell me, are you going to eat it or not? Jun Moxie gritted his teeth and asked, as if he had flown into a rage out of humiliation. Although what Fatty said was the truth, one shouldn't hit someone's face, and one shouldn't expose someone's shortcomings. No, I won't eat it even if you beat me to death. I'd rather be slapped to death by you than eat your trashy pills. Tang Yuan said, looking death in the eye. You've really grown up now. You even dare to challenge me. Do you think I won't beat you to death? Fatty Tang, I'll be honest with you. If you don't eat it today, I'll beat you to death 18 times and save you 18 times. Let's see if I can do it or not. Jun Moxie raised his hand and charged at him fiercely. Without saying a word, he picked up a stick and smashed it down on Fatty Tang's face with a swoosh. With a loud bang, Fatty's broad back was hit hard. He screamed and fell down with a thud. The wind whistled above his head. Jun Moxie's second stick had already landed mercilessly. Wait, I'll eat it. Fatty Tang screamed. His tone had changed. The stick stopped when it came into contact with his shoulder muscles. Jun Moxie sneered and asked with a murderous tone, Didn't you just say that you won't eat it even if I beat you to death? Didn't you want me to kill you and make it quick and easy? I'm fulfilling your moral integrity. What the hell are you screaming for? Where's your moral integrity? Tang Yuan lay on the ground and weakly begged for mercy. Big brother, my dear big brother, I give up. I did say that just now, but I haven't finished. Sob. Why are you so agitated? Haven't finished? Jun Moxie blinked. What I said was, I won't eat it even if you beat me to death. Tang Yuan wiped his tears and said, but as long as I don't die, I'll eat it. I see. At least you know when to stop. Jun Moxie nodded with a kind expression. Fatty, you're good. Come eat this. After receiving the praise, Fatty opened his mouth and wanted to smile. However, he began to cry instead. Snot and tears flowed down his face as he bawled. Then, Fatty swallowed the odd-smelling, slimming pill in a heroic manner. In an instant, the room was filled with wails and howls. After a long while, Jun Moxie shook his head and sighed. He frowned and walked out of Fatty's room. Chapter 11:15. Time flowed like water, and in the blink of an eye, another 3 days had passed. By the time he took the 10th pill, Tang Yuan had finally managed to slim down. This time, after taking the pill, it didn't hurt or itch and didn't have any negative side effects. Instead, it caused his muscles to contract and his sweat pores to be compressed. Then, drops of milky white fat were gradually excreted from the sweat pores all over his body. This excretion would only slowly stop after he returned to his normal height and fat ratio. Furthermore, it was accompanied by a very powerful restorative effect. As the accumulated fat was excreted from his body, another function of this pill was to contract the skin so that the skin that had suddenly slimmed down could maintain its normal taut state, so that it wouldn't fall into a terrible state of sagging and sagging. For the entire morning, Tang Yuan continued to sit on a specially made giant high chair. The chair was placed in a huge bathtub, and the fat excreted from his body had actually accumulated to the brim. A full 200 jin, and it didn't stop there. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Fatty Tang slept on his bed and slept for a day and a night. When he woke up, all the fat excreted from his body had turned into oil and flowed all the way from his bed to the ground, forming a small river. It flowed out the door, through the corridor, and into the courtyard, where it once again formed a puddle. Then it flowed out of the courtyard and meandered away for an unknown distance. The next day, Fatty Tang got up on his own, feeling refreshed and full of vitality. He took a delightful bath and was so excited that he looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. He felt so relaxed that he could fly. After putting on his original set of clothes, he found that his original clothes could now be used as a blanket. Helpless, he borrowed a set of clothes from Jun Moxie and found that it was only slightly tight and could still be worn. A miracle. No, this was a miracle created by God. Fatty Tang's eyes were brimming with tears. No, now, Tang Yuan could no longer be called Fatty Tang. Tang Yuan was no longer fat at all. Although he still couldn't bear to look back on the days of losing weight, he finally let go of Jun Moxie's abuse. These days, Fatty Tang was really, really fat. He was the fat king. He really was him. Suddenly, one day, Fatty wasn't fat anymore. He wasn't a fat king. He really wasn't him. Fatty had once created a well-known record. There was a huge scale in the market that was specially used to weigh fat pigs. But when it was used to weigh Fatty Tang, the scale suddenly broke with a pa sound. Because of this incident, a proverb appeared in Tianxiang City. You are fat, but not heavy. Tang Daxiao broke the scale. But now, at this moment, Tang Daxiao was very careful, and very serious as he weighed himself. He didn't seem to believe his own eyes. After checking again and again, he found out that his weight was 160 kilograms. For Tang Yuan, who was about 175 meters tall, it could be said to be a rather healthy and slender standard body shape. I'm not dreaming, right? Even if I'm dreaming, let me sleep a little later. Let me see this dream before I wake up. The overjoyed Tang Yuan couldn't wait to go home as soon as possible. He couldn't wait to show his perfect body to Sun Xiaomei. But he still restrained himself and pestered Jun Daxiao for 3 more Viagra pills. He believed that no one would be able to guess what kind of pill this was. This was the aphrodisiac pill that Jun Moxie had specially made for Tang Yuan. He had simply named it the Viagra pill. Although the name of this pill was somewhat inelegant, its effect was extraordinary. 1 pill was enough to guarantee Fatty Tang's sexual happiness for the rest of his life. If he were to take 3 in a row, then that function of fatties would directly rise to the powerful level. However, Jun Daxiao told Tang Yuan a taboo. After taking this pill, he couldn't have sexual intercourse for half a month. Otherwise, he would basically be finished for the rest of his life. He must remember this. Actually, this taboo was made up by Jun Moxie. Previously, when Fatty Tang scolded Jun Moxie a few days ago, it was one thing to understand. However, if Jun Moxie didn't teach him a lesson, it would be intolerable. Moreover, the first half a month after taking the Viagra pill was the time when one's body was burning with lust, yet he had to hold it in for half a month. This feeling, if my brothers want to try it, you can take our Earth's Viagra pill for half a month. This feeling is definitely incomparably ecstatic, and you're destined to never forget it for the rest of your life. A day later, Tang Yuan's eyes were glowing green. Whenever he saw the female attendants in the evil monarch manner, his face would instantly turn red, but he still forcefully restrained himself, not daring to do anything out of line. To PK for a lifetime in half a month. No matter how daring Tang Yuan was, he wouldn't dare to try it. By the second day, Tang Daxiao's thirst had already developed to the point of researching the female Xian beasts in the Tianfa forest. Jun Dashao had personally seen Fatty Tang grabbing a female mouse the size of a rubber ball, his eyes glowing green as he studied something. On the third day, Tang Yuan finally couldn't take it anymore and wanted to return immediately. He had calculated it very clearly. This journey would take about half a month's time. When he returned to Tianxiang City, it would be the end of the deadline. At that time, when he saw Sun Xiaomei, as he thought about it, Tang Yuan couldn't help but laugh lewdly as he drooled. A businessman was a businessman after all. Before leaving, the calculating Tang Yuan still pestered Jun Moxie and asked for 100 Viagra pills. This was the best way to get rich. After receiving Jun Dashao's advice, Tang Yuan decided to dissolve a Viagra pill with 100 times the amount of water and store it in 100 small bottles. He would call it Viagra God Water, Golden Spear, Forever Strong. These 100 Viagra pills were enough for Tang Yuan to auction off 10,000 times, and every time, the starting price would be 10,000 gold taels. Everyone can imagine it, especially when Fatty Tang decided that when he returned, he would immediately announce that this was the Viagra God Water, personally refined by the evil monarch. He would use the banner of the evil monarch to amass wealth for himself. As for what the world would think of the evil monarch, and whether they would guess that this evil monarch had returned to researching these strange medicines because of his illness, those were not within the scope of Tang Yuan's consideration. Only when the gold was in his hands would it be real. Furthermore, before leaving, Tang Yuan sneakily asked Jun Moxie if he could give me a few dozen bottles of each of the slimming pills that he had researched previously, and then, as a supplementary item, give me a few hundred bottles of the real slimming pills as well. How would Jun Dashao have the time to do such things? He directly rejected him. In the end, Fatty threw a tantrum and refused to leave. He even begged for 3 bottles of each kind, 50 pills each. These medicines were naturally prepared to be diluted and auctioned off. After all, there were still many fatty people in this world. And those slimming pills that were extremely effective and had no side effects were the greatest blessing for all the fatty people in this world. As for those failed slimming pills, they were also going to be auctioned off. Not only were they going to be auctioned off, they were going to be auctioned off at a high price. Tang Yuan's heart was filled with viciousness. I can't be the only one in this world to suffer this kind of punishment. All the fatty people who want to slim down, not only do you have to suffer this kind of punishment, you have to pay a high price for it. And you have to buy it 10 times in a row before you can slim down. Although the price was very high, Tang Yuan knew that there were some people who care more about being fat than him, especially those wives of high-ranking officials. Even if it was 10 times more painful, those wives would still be willing to bid and bid crazily. This kind of torture was not only to be auctioned off, and it was to be auctioned off at fixed times. One had to say that the viciousness of Tang Yuan's heart was truly evident. It had already reached a certain level. As a businessman, not only was his heart black, even his intestines were black. At the moment they parted, Jun Moxie made Fatty Tang consume a set of 7 colored holy fruits and a petal of the exquisite lotus. Moreover, he also prepared a set of them in a jade box for him to bring back to Sun Xiaomei. Tang Yuan left with tears of gratitude. Before he left, he noticed that Jun Moxie had a very strange smile on his face, but he didn't think too much about it. This good brother of his had done too much for him. Too much. To have such a friend in life, what more could one ask for? However, after returning to Tianxiang City, Fatty started to regret for the first time. The reason was very simple. His weight loss this time was too successful, and Sun Xiaomei couldn't even recognize him anymore. This seemed to be a very bizarre, but very real tragedy. Tang Yuan was badly battered, and he had to explain for a long time before he could really explain it clearly. But what really made Tang Dashao regret was not this matter. Both of them had consumed the exquisite lotus and 7-colored holy fruits that Jun Moxie had given them, and both of them had increased their lifespans by 1,000 years. Therefore, in a sense, it was equivalent to letting Tang Yuan completely fall into the evil clutches of Sun Xiaomei, and this period of time was almost indefinite. At the very least, within 1,000 years, he was destined not to have an affair. Even if he really did have an affair, It would at most be a short 10 years of reunion, and then he would have to face the beautiful woman growing old. This left a deep and painful mental torment for Fatty, and only with Sun Xiaomei. Therefore, Fatty's life was basically completely controlled by Sun Xiaomei. When Tang Yuan suddenly came to his senses and scolded Jun Moxie, it was already a matter of a few hundred years later. And at that time, Tang Yuan's wealth had already reached the point where all the emperors, ministers, and aristocratic families in the world would covet it. But he could only stay with one wife. This directly created a legend. In the world, other than the evil monarch, there was also a Casanova who could love a woman for 1,000 years. Only Tang Yuan, who could remain infatuated for 1,000 years. Only the god of wealth, shopkeeper Tang, who could. Only young Master Tang. The once tyrannical and evil big dandy Tang actually became the generation's Casanova and became the standard by which tens of thousands of young girls chose their husbands. This could be said to be a miracle, or perhaps it was a miracle created by the god of wealth. Countless descendants, especially young girls, were moved to tears when they talked about this, just because of Tang Yuan's infatuation. But who could have guessed that this so-called infatuation of shopkeeper Tang was because he had no other choice? Another point worth mentioning was that throughout his life, Tang Yuan had always addressed himself as a shopkeeper and not the master of the aristocratic hall. Tang Yuan's friendship with Jun Moxie had never changed since he had grown up with him. And Tang Yuan had sealed everything that had come from Jun Moxie after Jun Moxie had disappeared from this world. Even a drop of water, a drop of wine, or a piece of paper couldn't be touched by a second person besides himself. Even Madame Tang, Sun Xiaomei, couldn't be an exception. There was an extremely secret chamber in Tang Yuan's mansion. No one was allowed to go in. This order was enforced until Tang Yuan's life ended. Later generations couldn't restrain their curiosity and opened the secret chamber. But they got a huge shock. Everyone thought that Tang Yuan was the richest man in the world since ancient times. He was the god of wealth. So, what kind of earth-shattering treasure was hidden in this secret chamber that he had cherished and valued for his entire life? But what was beyond the people's expectations was that there were only 2 chairs and a table in the secret chamber. There were 2 wine cups and a wine pot on the table. It seemed as if 2 people had been drinking and chatting in this place countless times. The walls were densely packed with extremely ordinary things. There were pieces of cloth, jars of wine, and some empty bottles. These were the small jade bottles that had once been filled with the pills that Jun Moxie had given him. After auctioning off the elixirs, these little bottles, without exception, were all collected by Tang Yuan here. As for the other things, if there was someone who had accompanied Jun Xie and Tang Yuan for a period of time, they would discover that these were all the things that these 2 debauches had done together, the things that they had done together, the memories that they had shared together. The entire secret chamber was clean and tidy. It was all cleaned by Tang Yuan, who was known for his laziness, because this place was the most valuable treasure in his life. Friendship, affection. Tang Yuan would often sit there alone and drink the wine that Jun Xie had left for him. He would then sigh. I've had a friend like the 3rd young master in my life, but this life is enough. No regrets. How much Jun Moxie had done for Tang Yuan. Tang Yuan knew it better than anyone else. And how much Tang Yuan had done for Jun Moxie was also clear to everyone. These 2 foppish young masters had truly done it. They would always be brothers. This promise. On the wall of the secret chamber, there was a large handwriting by Tang Yuan. In this world, no one can touch my brother. No one seemed to know that this was what Jun Moxie had said when Tang Yuan was framed and fell into the cesspool. At the same time, this was also the promise that the evil monarch had made to his brother. And he had really done it. However, it was not only Jun Moxie who had done it, because this was also the promise that Tang Yuan had made to his brother, Jun Moxie. This sentence might be meaningless at the moment, but it did not mean that it would be meaningless forever. Every dog has its day, and the emperor has come to my house. Or perhaps time was the truly invincible thing. 1,000 years later, the evil monarch, Jun Moxie, had ascended a long time ago, and the successor of the evil monarch manor had encountered an unprecedented crisis. At that time, no one would have thought that the god of fortune, Tang Yuan, would stand on the side of the evil monarch manor. But it was precisely because Tang Yuan had ignored the advice of his family and the threats of various powers that the evil monarch manor had resolutely handed over his life savings, that the evil monarch manor had been able to tide over that crisis that was fated to be impossible to overcome. The life savings of the god of fortune, that was an astronomical figure in the truest sense of the word, a sum of wealth that could truly enslave ghosts and gods. All of this was because of a single sentence. What's mine is my brother's. In this world, no one can touch my brother. This sentence would never change. It would never ever change. Even if my brother is no longer here, what's mine is still my brother's. In the past, in the present, and in the future. This is what it means to be a brother. The book ends here as an explanation to Tang Yuan. I really like this character, Tang Yuan. I often wonder if I'll have such a friend in my life. He can be cunning, despicable, shameless, and unscrupulous to others. But towards friends, no matter if they're poor or rich, no matter if their status is high or low, they'll always have that pure and innocent heart. This will never change. If there is, this life will be enough. Eternally unchanging. Only true feelings are eternal. I love my friend, my brother. As long as I once had that feeling, no matter if you've forgotten it, or betrayed it, I'll always feel warmth in my heart. But for the mutual sacrifices we made in the past, my heart will always be filled with warmth. Those who have lied to me before, I can choose not to know you. But in my heart, you are still my brother. My greatest hope is that no matter who it is, as long as I've interacted with them before, they'll all say this. It's worth it to have a friend like Feng Ling at a certain point in their lives. This will be the highest reward for me. Thank you, everyone. Tang Yuan wrote this paragraph very attentively and emotionally. All the brothers and sisters who like Tang Yuan and the wretched Fatty hope that the ending of Fatty, the biggest supporting character in this book, won't disappoint everyone. Finally, in Tang Yuan's words, everyone, during this period of time in this book, I've been very happy and satisfied with everyone's company. To be able to spend more than a year with all of you, to be able to support Third Young Master with everyone, I, Tang Yuan, feel that it's worth it. Al, thank you. Chapter 11:16. Time passed really quickly, and in the blink of an eye, another few days had passed. There was still 1 month and 3 days until the war for seizing the heavens. Although there was still more than a month's time, it was already the most suitable time to prepare for the battle. Just the preparation alone required a lot of time. Jun Moxie had never thought that he would be able to defeat the strange races in a single battle. This would definitely be a battle of attrition. It would require a long period of planning and preparation, including manpower, tactics, rations, money, and resources. For this goal, he had prepared for a long time, but he still did not have the confidence to win. Just how strong were the strange races? Jun Moxie did not know anything at all. Right at this moment, an earth-shattering event suddenly occurred. This matter caused everyone in the continent to feel unprepared. On this day, Jun Moxie and Mei Xuan were sitting in the study, preparing to officially select the people who would be going to the war for seizing the heavens. This was going to be the largest expedition in history, and it would be recorded in the history books, because this battle was not only for the war for seizing the heavens that happened once every 500 years. It was also to wipe out the strange races in one fell swoop, to completely destroy the source of evil that threatened the Xian continent. Or perhaps this would also be the final battle, to end this final battle that had lasted for tens of thousands of years, sweeping across 2 realms for lands and millions of lives. The people of the Xian continent, no matter how much internal strife there was, but even if the meat was rotten, it would still rot in the pot. This was a point that Jun Moxie had never considered. But towards those disgusting, strange races, Jun Moxie hated them from the bottom of his bones. He would definitely not allow them to take a single step past the pillar of heaven's mountains. In fact, he had already made up his mind to completely annihilate them. Mei Shuiyan had been hiding from Jun Moxie for quite some time now. She had always felt uneasy, but when she saw Jun Moxie again and saw that Jun Moxie's expression was the same as usual, without any signs of anger, her heart slowly calmed down. Although she also knew that with Jun Moxie's character, he would definitely seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Perhaps he had the idea of 10 years is not too late for a gentleman to take revenge, but she did not take it to heart. If it really came to that, how could she let him not take revenge? A life for a life, a debt to be repaid. This was a perfectly justified principle. Besides, he had indeed gone a little overboard that time. He had really gone overboard, taking 10,000 steps back. If that time really came, even if the bad guy didn't look for him, he would take the initiative to look for the bad guy. What am I thinking? Just as the two of them sat down and were about to start planning the overall situation, an inexplicable vibration suddenly came from the ground. A powerful tremor. This vibration had reached a certain level. The entire Evil Monarch Manor also shook violently a few times, as if a storm was raging. The huge Evil Monarch Manor was like a willow tree in the wind, swaying powerlessly. If not for the fact that the entire foundation of the Evil Monarch Manor had already been completely tempered by Jun Moxie's power of earth, there might have been a further disaster this time. Both of their faces changed at the same time. They looked at each other and saw the same expression in each other's eyes. What exactly happened? Why did such a strange change occur? In the next instant, the two of them went to the window at the same time. Then, with a leap, they appeared at the highest point of the Tian Fa forest. In the distance, the earth still shook and the mountains shook from time to time. Countless mountains were rumbling as huge rocks fell from them. Some of the steeper mountains directly fell off their bodies. Jun Moxie and Mei Shuiyan looked at each other. The ground was still shaking, and the rocks on the ground were also flying up high. Countless trees were swaying, and everything was like the end of the world. Both of them had the same thought at the same time. Something big has happened, because right now, when the two of them stood the highest point, as far as their eyes could see, all of the mountains in the surroundings were collapsing, all of them jumping. However, it was definitely not something that happened within the range of one's vision. This meant that the place where the accident happened was extremely far away. But since it was something that happened so far away, it could actually affect this place and cause such a huge effect. The severity of the situation this time would naturally rise to a rather high level, and it wouldn't even be qualified to be mentioned in the same breath as the previous major incidents. Jun Moxie closed his eyes, and his powerful divine sense spread out. In an instant, he had already searched thousands of li, but he didn't discover anything. But Jun Moxie's divine sense had already reached its limit. It could not reach any further. Opening his eyes, Jun Moxie's eyes shone with an unprecedented seriousness. Something really big has happened. If my guess is not wrong, if my guess is not wrong. When Jun Moxie said this, he repeated it twice. His face was a little pale. However, he didn't continue because the consequences of what he wanted to say and what he wanted to say were too severe. It was so serious that even someone as daring as Jun Moxie didn't dare to say it rashly. Mei Shuiyan stared at him in a daze, and the expression on her pretty face slowly turned ugly. Both of their guesses were basically the same. Because a situation like this had happened once before 10,000 years ago, and there was a historical record of it. If it wasn't for that time, there wouldn't have been such a serious situation. And that was the time when the pillar of heaven's mountains collapsed. And the situation now was much more serious than that time. Jun Mo CS sucked in a deep breath of air and said, "I'm sure you've already guessed it. Right now, there's only one thing that could produce such a frightening might, and that is the pillar of heaven's mountains completely collapsing." Mei Shuiyan's face turned paler and paler, but she nodded slowly. Apart from this, there really wasn't any other explanation. But Jun Moxie had another worry in his heart. If that's really the case, Then the three holy lands are so close to the pillar of heaven's mountains. I'm afraid it's not optimistic, ah? Everyone in the evil monarch manor flew out of their rooms in a panic, climbing up to the nearest high vantage point and looking into the distance. Everyone's faces were filled with fear. This time it was really a big deal. But 10,000 years ago, it was because Miao Qingsheng had transcended the heavenly tribulation that caused the pillar of heaven's mountains to collapse. But what was the reason for the collapse this time? Could it be that there was someone who was even more terrifying than Miao Qingsheng? That was something inconceivable and something that was impossible to happen. Then the only possibility was that an accident had really happened. And it was an accident that no one had expected. And this accident was most likely caused by the strange races at the pillar of heaven's mountains. Because it wasn't just the Xian continent that wanted to exterminate the strange races forever. The strange races also wanted to conquer the Xian continent and enjoy such a beautiful world. Gather everyone and prepare to set off. We'll go to Mount Heaven Saint first and see what the three holy lands are doing. Within 4 hours, all Xin beasts and humans with the strength of a venerable and above must gather outside the evil monarch manor. If anyone dares to delay, kill without mercy. Jun Moxie made a prompt decision and immediately gave the strictest order. If something really happened at the pillar of heaven's mountains, and it was caused by the strange races, then the invasion of the strange races would be a foregone conclusion. Then the disaster would definitely not be small. Every minute of delay would result in immeasurable losses. When Jun Moxie faced the three holy lands, he could say that he was indifferent towards the peace of the continent and the lives of the people. But now that the matter was right before his eyes, how could Jun Moxie truly be indifferent? Protecting the country was the hot-bloodedness of a man, no matter where he was. The order to gather had already been passed down, but the Tian Fa forest was extremely vast. Although Jun Moxie and Mei Shuyan had already gathered all the Xian beast experts at the evil monarch manor's side, it would still take at least 4 hours to gather all their forces. If the Pillar of Heaven's mountains really collapsed due to some unknown reason, the Xian continent that had lost this natural barrier would face the invasion of the strange races. Jun Moxie didn't even dare to imagine how great of a calamity this would bring to the common people, because the calamity this time was impossible to estimate. The tremors on the ground continued for a long time. The small-scale tremors lasted for nearly 2 hours before they suddenly escalated. The tremors became even more intense. At the same time, the temperature of the entire world seemed to be gradually rising. Although the change was not very obvious, it was indeed continuing to rise. Jun Moxie and Mei Shuyan's faces grew uglier and uglier. A bad feeling arose in their hearts at the same time. Jun Moxie grabbed onto Mei Shuyan's slender waist and directly activated the yin-yang escape art. With a schwa sound, they flew straight up into the sky. For normal movement techniques, no matter how extraordinary they were, even if it was raised to the level of a Saint Venerable, they would at most be able to fly a few hundred zhang. But the moment the cheat-like yin-yang escape art was activated, they could soar tens of thousands of zhang into the sky. The two of them rose straight up, but they didn't know how high they were in the sky. Looking into the distance, they could vaguely sense that in the far southwest direction, there seemed to be clouds rising faintly. Jun Moxie let out a long sigh. In the next instant, Jun Moxie brought Mei Shuyan back to the ground. My guess was right. This is really the worst-case scenario. Jun Moxie's handsome face was currently shrouded in a layer of dark clouds. What exactly happened? Mei Shuyan had never seen Jun Moxie lose his composure like this before. Her voice was slightly trembling as she asked. It's actually a volcano eruption. And it's not just one volcano. It's very likely that the group of volcanoes near the Pillar of Heaven's mountains have all erupted. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to see it from here. And the sudden increase in the tremors could very well be caused by one of the volcanoes erupting first, which then caused the rest of the volcanoes to erupt. Jun Moxie sighed deeply. Chapter 11:17. What is a volcano? How should I put it? To put it simply, a normal mountain is no different from an ordinary mountain, but under certain special circumstances, it will suddenly spew out flames and magma. Its temperature is enough to melt gold and iron, and no matter how strong the experts are, they will not be able to face it head-on. Even the most ordinary small volcano will have a radius of at least a few hundred li. Right now, if all the volcanoes in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains erupt at the same time, I'm afraid that the radius of the disaster will at least extend to 10,000 li. All life will be plunged into misery and suffering, and all life will be doomed. Jun Mo Xia whispered. So the so-called volcano is the eruption of the demon mountain fire. Mei Shuiyin said in shock. Then what should we do now? This is a natural disaster. It's not something that humans can fight against. There's nothing we can do. Jun Moxie thought to himself. So the volcanoes in this world are called the demon mountain fire. But this name is quite appropriate. A heavenly punishment like the demon mountain fire has not appeared in the Xian continent for thousands of years. How can they erupt at the same time? Mei Shuiyin frowned and said worriedly. As you said, even if it's just one demon mountain fire, it's enough to destroy all life. If so many of them erupt at the same time, the disaster will be hard to predict. It's not surprising for the volcanoes to erupt at the same time. I've personally been to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and observed the terrain. If the peaks of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains really collapsed, then it's not surprising for a large-scale volcano to erupt. Jun Moxie said indifferently. The ground we're standing on is about 10,000 feet below the ground. Since ancient times, there has always been a high-temperature region. The temperature there is enough to melt anything in this world. It was like a huge underground sea of flames, surging violently or flowing silently. Most of the time, it won't burst out of the ground. But once it's blocked or shaken, it will be stimulated by these stimuli, forming bubbles. When it accumulates to a certain extent, it will cause the surface to change. If it's close to the surface, it will spew out the accumulated waves, causing the so-called volcanic eruption. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains is tens of thousands of feet high. Since ancient times, no matter how profound one's Xian cultivation is, no one has ever been able to reach the peak. Once such a huge mountain toppled, the tremors it would cause would be enough to affect the entire continent. As I mentioned earlier, while the continent is trembling, the underground is also trembling severely. Especially the large area where the Pillar of Heaven's mountains used to be, there will be countless huge cracks that will lead to the depths of the earth. And the magma deep underground will spontaneously flow in the opposite direction of these cracks because of the vibrations. This kind of flow is slow at first, but as it flows, it will gradually increase in speed and become faster and faster, finally becoming an unstoppable torrent. As for the places where cracks appear, the ground will become abnormally soft due to the high temperature, and the magma will push in from all over the place. As more and more magma gathers, cracks will appear on the ground again. This cycle will repeat until the magma finally rushes out. Jun Moxie furrowed his brows. This time, I'm afraid it's really bad. Actually, Jun Daxiao only knew a thing or two about this theory. Since he didn't really understand it, he could only force himself to explain it. Mei Shuiyin was completely puzzled, unable to understand what he was saying. But time was of the essence right now, and there was no time for her to ask any more questions. In the Tian Fa forest, as the ground continued to tremble, countless experts rushed over from all directions. Under the summons, all the Xian beast experts rushed over like 10,000 horses galloping over. In the skies, countless flying Xian bees from various races also flew over, covering the entire sky. Countless flying Xian bees covered the entire sky like dark clouds. Then, with a swoosh sound, they landed on the ground, causing the sky to regain its clarity. As they came in groups, the plaza in front of the evil monarch manor became more and more crowded. In the end, it was already so densely packed that there was no place for them to land. But all the people who came stood there quietly, not making the slightest bit of commotion or noise. Between the groups, there was a clear distinction, and they lined up neatly. although the ground continued to tremble, but everyone stood on the ground, not moving at all. Jun Moxie and Mei Shuyan moved at the same time, already standing in front of everyone. Under Jun Moxie's power of earth, a tall platform automatically rose from the ground, lifting the two up. With a flash, Saint Venerable Lu and the other 7 Saint Venerables had also arrived, standing in front of the two. What exactly happened? Why would there be such a huge commotion? The 8 Saint Venerables all had solemn expressions on their faces. Based on the current situation, there's a high possibility that the Pillar of Heaven's mountains has completely collapsed. Jun Moxie said lightly, "We need to move forward on our side. Otherwise, when the strange races pass through the natural barrier and charge into the heart of the continent, it will not be an easy thing to expel them anymore. The difficulty of the cleanup will be 10,000 times greater. The war for seizing the heavens has erupted in advance." Saint Venerable Lu was shocked, his eyes widening in disbelief. The consequences this time will definitely be much more severe than the normal war for seizing the heavens. Jun Moxie smiled bitterly. But it's not impossible for you to say that. It's just that the decisive battle this time will definitely be extremely tragic. The faces of the 8 Saint Venerables instantly became anxious, and then they retreated to the side at the same time, not saying a word. Their meaning was very clear. They were waiting for the two of them to give the order. The 8 Saint Venerables were all influential figures who had personally witnessed the war for seizing the heavens, so they naturally understood the cruelty and terror of the strange races better than ordinary people. Now that the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had collapsed and the natural barrier of the continent had been lost, they naturally knew the severity of the consequences better than anyone else. So they were not willing to waste even the slightest bit of time. Even if they had any questions, they forced themselves not to ask, because every question and every answer required time. And these questions and answers might be so short, so inconspicuous, but this little bit of time could allow the strange races to slaughter hundreds or even more commoners. They were already old and had already decided to retreat behind the scenes, leaving everything in the Tian Fa forest to Jun Moxie, Mei Shuyan, and the younger generation Beast Kings. But in the face of such a huge matter, they still stood at the front of the formation without any hesitation, because the mission of Tian Fa was to protect the world. Although after a long period of peace, the world had already forgotten about them, forgotten about their heroic exploits, and disdained to be associated with them. In fact, there were many people who harbored great enmity towards them, with weapons pointed at them, wanting to eat their flesh, skin them, drink their blood, and steal their pills to satisfy their own despicable desires. But in this moment of crisis, they were still abiding by the mission left behind by their ancestors 10,000 years ago. For the continent, for the world, for this perseverance, not hesitating to sacrifice, not hesitating to sacrifice themselves. Now that they stood out once again, they were still as hot-blooded as ever, and their hearts were filled with righteousness. They were still the most dependable steel wall. At this moment, all the combat forces were present. Everyone below the supreme level. Leave immediately. Jun Moxie swept his gaze across the crowd, and his voice was like metal clanging, leaving no room for negotiation. Under such a firm order, all the Xian beasts with lower cultivation did not hesitate, and with a hua sound, they quickly retreated from the center of the battlefield. At the edge of the battlefield, they looked at their companions who were still able to remain in the battlefield with envious and fervent eyes. They also want to go and kill the enemy, but at this moment, they could only obey the order unconditionally. Right now, they could not afford to waste any time at all. Jun Moxie's gaze was as fast as lightning, like a sharp sword, sweeping across the faces of everyone present. Everyone this time, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains unexpectedly collapsed. The entire continent could be said to have fallen into a precarious predicament. In these 10,000 years, Tian Fa has participated in countless war for seizing the heavens, defending the dignity of this continent. Today, an even crueler test awaits us. This time, it will be an unprecedentedly cruel battle. Let me ask you, what should you do? Fight! 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 All the Xian beasts roared at the same time, their voices shaking the heavens. June Moxie stood straight like a sword and said solemnly, "In these 10,000 years, Tian Fa has made countless contributions to the world. Countless seniors have shed their blood on the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, leaving their corpses in the war for seizing the heavens. But the world does not understand and approve of Tian Fa, and as the time of peace grows longer, the attitude of the world towards Tian Fa also becomes worse and worse." June Moxie said loudly, "Now, in that peace, an accident has suddenly occurred, as well as the impending disaster. Let me ask you, facing the hostility of the world, how will you choose?" "Fight! Fight! Fight!" Their voices shook the heavens, like a rainbow piercing through the sun. "Still fight, fight, fight!" Without any hesitation, June Moxie felt a lump in his throat. This bunch of cute Xian beasts, the people of the world had caused them so much harm, and used all sorts of methods to hunt them down. But at this critical moment, when the continent was on the brink of disaster, they still stood out without any regrets, to protect those humans who were not worthy of their protection, the purest, truest, and kindest of hearts. Fight for honor. Fight for the continent. Fight for Tian Fa. Fight for ourselves. Fight for that flame that will never be extinguished, for that boiling hot blood that will not be extinguished for 10,000 years. Jun Mo Xie raised his arms and shouted. The entire arena was filled with an unprecedented fighting spirit. It soared to the sky and soared to the heavens. At this moment, Tian Fa's thirst for battle had already reached its peak. "Eagle King, Bear King," Jun Moxie roared, a fierce light shooting out from his eyes. Present, Eagle King, Bear King, and Bear Mountain all had solemn expressions as they stepped forward and cupped their fists to await the order. His firm footsteps caused a cloud of dust to fly up from the ground in the courtyard. Their tall and sturdy bodies were filled with solemnity. From June Moxie's expression just now, they could tell that the mission that was about to be handed to them was going to be an extremely difficult one. It was also an extremely dangerous mission. Chapter 11:18. All 3,000 of the Eagle People's forces take to the skies. The Bear People will be the first wave of arrows and rush to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains at full speed. Confirm the situation and make sure to arrive as soon as possible. If the worst situation really happens, please do not hesitate to sacrifice anything and launch the first wave of attacks at the first instant. Jun Moxie ordered coldly. Speed was the most important in war. The Eagle People's flying speed was the fastest, and the bear race was the one with the strongest sustained battle strength amongst all the beasts. The Eagle People had to fly with all their might in this battle, so when they reached the place, the weaker flying Xian beasts would not be able to display much of their combat strength. The only outcome would be a tragic sacrifice. But this kind of sacrifice was necessary, because it was them who had brought the 3,000 bear warriors over at the first instant. Yes, the Eagle King's black face was expressionless, and his voice was like iron. The 8 of us will also go with this wave of people. Saint Venerable Lu took a large step forward, and the 8 old brothers stood together with the Eagle People and the Bear People who had already stepped forward. The previous generation of beast kings that had been shamelessly betrayed by the people of the 3 holy lands did not hesitate at this moment. They stood up resolutely, even though they had already understood that this first wave of attacks would only result in defeat and death. Going forward meant death, and without any hesitation, "Good, bring the wine," Jun Moxie roared, causing the entire heaven and earth to tremble. "We want the best wine. For our heroes. Let's go." In the evil monarch manner, the servants quickly carried out countless bottles of strong wine. Huge bowls were filled with blood-red wine, and 6,000 warriors raised their bowls at the same time. Jun Moxie was the first to raise a bowl of wine, and he raised his brows and shouted, "This bowl of wine is to all the heroes who protect the continent. In this battle, there will be countless brothers who will not return. Here I, June Moxie, will send my brothers off." June Moxie's words were very clear, but it was also very cruel. This incident happened too suddenly, and there was no time for the system to arrange the troops. The first wave of 6,000 Eagle people and Bear people, apart from being the first wave of defense, was to be sent to their deaths as cannon fodder. The chances of survival were slim. Even the 8 beast emperors who had reached the holy venerable realm were no exception. But only by using their lives to fight for it could the follow-up troops have enough time to arrange their strategy. This was war, and war had always been cruel and merciless. There had never been a war where no one died, or where only the enemy died. You guys are really crucial this time. Let me put it more clearly. I want to use your lives to buy some time for the entire continent. I only have one request for all of you. No matter how you fight, even if you die, try your best to drag as many strange races down with you. That was all. That's it. June Moxie's voice was cold and emotionless, like a sharp sword, exploding in the air. The entire place was silent. The 6,000 Eagle people and Bear people's eyes shone brightly, determined and simple. Hesitation, cowardice, all negative emotions did not appear on them. Not even the slightest bit. Drink this cup of wine. Whether you live or die. Whether you live or die. All of you are heroes. All of you are my brothers. June and Moxie roared. Brothers, let us use our hot blood to blossom with the most magnificent colors on this continent. Let us use this victory to create an eternal history. Drink, 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 drink. Bang, 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 bang. The 6,000 bowls fell to the ground at the same time, shattering into pieces. Brothers and sisters, may you have a safe journey. Let's go. Mei Shuyan raised her hand, and a blood-red flag flew into the hands of the Eagle King. Brothers, let us go first and fight to our heart's content. The Eagle King let out a long cry and grabbed the flag. Its body leaped into the air and somersaulted in mid-air, transforming into a giant black eagle. His body was like iron, and his feathers were like arrows. The blood-red flag unfurled in the wind, and 5 words were written on it: Tion Fa's Death Squad. Blood red, fluttering in the wind. Bear Mountain laughed out loud, and his muscular body rose into the air. He cupped his fists and said, "Brothers, I, Old Bear, will go first. I have been waiting for this day for a few hundred years. Tion Fa is mighty." Bear Mountain roared and landed on the Eagle King's back. The Eagle King's eyes flashed, filled with the determination to fight to the death. With a flap of its 7 zhong-wide wings, it raised its head and let out a shrill cry. The cry was like metal and stone, reverberating through the air. Carrying Big Bear, it was like a black arrow piercing through the heavens, soaring into the sky. The eagle soared through the 9 heavens, chasing the wind and parting the clouds, piercing through the air like lightning. Without any hesitation, without any reluctance, he broke through the air and left the skies of his homeland. With a loud boom, all the black eagles on the ground soared into the sky, turning into a bolt of black lightning. 3,000 bolts of lightning merged into a black torrent, following behind the Eagle King, carrying their comrades as they flew towards the southwest direction. 6,000 warriors set off, like a sharp arrow piercing through the sky, an arrow leaving the bow. They would use their lives to write history. The entire troop turned into a small black dot in the sky, and not a single one of them turned back to look at the Tion Fa forest, to look at the homeland that had nurtured them, the homeland that held so many memories. There was only determination. Strong Eagle King, strong Bear King, strong 6,000 warriors. Mei Shuyan's eyes turned red, and tears streamed down her cheeks. She had personally sent 6,000 brothers and sisters on a journey of death. How could she not feel sad? How could she not cry? June Moxie's face was as heavy as steel, and as solemn as a mountain, without any expression. For the second group, he had sent out his own men, Solitary Eagle, Feng Wanyun. The two of you lead 300 Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer members and 300 warriors of the Crane tribe, and set off immediately. For the second group, quickly support the Eagle King and Bear King. Stop the enemy with all your strength and do not retreat. Yes, sir. Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyun stepped forward at the same time and cupped their hands to receive the order. Crane King Long Crane waved his hand, and 300 Xian Crane experts who had reached the saint level stepped forward. In the blink of an eye, they had already formed a team of humans and Xian Cranes. This team's speed was even faster. Following Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyun's command, a total of 300 high-leveled Xian Cranes used their snow-white feathers to form a rolling white cloud in the sky that was enough to cover the entire sky. Their departure time was only an hour later than the Eagle King and the rest. But Jun Moxie and the rest knew that by the time Solitary Eagle and the rest reached their destination, they would be at least 10 hours later than the Eagle King and the rest. The speed and endurance of a crane and an eagle could not be compared. Even with the strength of a saint level, it could not make up for this innate difference. These 10 hours, to the Eagle King and Bear King's troops, was definitely an extremely cruel test. Facing the strange races, could the 6,000 experts of the two tribes resist for 10 hours? This was something that no one dared to say they could do. In fact, even if they could hold out until Solitary Eagle and the rest arrived, they might not be able to avoid death. After all, they were facing a force that was 10 times, 100 times, or even stronger than them. Of course, if they could wait until Solitary Eagle and the rest arrived, the situation could be alleviated. After all, these were all experts among experts. Good steel must be used on the edge of the blade. Tiger King, Crane King. Jun Moxie's voice was like steel. The two of you will form the third echelon. Immediately set off to assist. Tiger King Earthcracker and Crane King Long Crane stepped forward at the same time, and a gust of wind swept up. The 6,000 brothers under the two kings soared into the sky and chased after them. Bailey Luo Yun, Lung Ao. Jun Moxie continued to order. Bring Tian Can, DK, and the 36 assassins, along with the 50 Peng brothers, form the fourth echelon. Jun Moxie said solemnly, never forget your job as assassins. Your mission this time is not to assist, but to assassinate. Do your best to kill the strange races, understand? Yes. Bailey Luo Yun and Lung Ao stepped forward. Set off. Another wave of sand and pebbles flew, and the courtyard was much more spacious now. Lion King, Monkey King, Peng King, Eagle King, Wolf King, the five of you, a total of 25,000 people, will form the fifth echelon. Everyone press forward. Bring enough medicine, rations, and all other strategic resources. Jun Moxie waved his hand. These 5 tribes were the ones with the largest numbers, but their combat power was also the weakest. But the combat power of these Xian beasts was not to be underestimated. Even though they were the logistics team, they could still become the vanguard at critical moments. The rest, including the Snake King and Panther King, will be under Jun Wui's command. From the entire southwest region, spread out in a fan shape and gradually advance. Search carefully. If there are any strange race experts who have already entered the mainland, do not leave a single one alive and annihilate them all. There is no time limit for this mission until we reach the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. We don't want any survivors, not a single one. Jun Moxie had never forgotten that disgusting thing like Jiang Junji. If the strange races left any seeds after entering, there would be endless trouble in the future. And this layer of danger was perhaps the biggest threat of the strange races invasion. And for such a matter, apart from the blood-clad great general, Jun Wui, no one else had such commanding and analytical abilities. Only the former blood-clad great general could take on such a complicated mission and still do it in an orderly manner. Roger. Jun Wui, the Snake King, and the rest step forward to receive the order. The rest stay in Tion Fa and await further orders. Without this Lord's orders, no one is allowed to take a single step out of the Tion Fa forest. Otherwise, they will be severely punished. Even if outsiders come, if they do not know the local secret language, they are not allowed to activate the protective formation. Jun Mo Xie emphasized this point in a serious manner. The incident at the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains had happened too suddenly, and the Zhan family's crisis had not truly been averted yet. If Zhan Lunhui and the rest made use of this opportunity to attack the evil monarch manor, then it would be a huge problem. Tion Fa had already sent out all its soldiers to fight. Although there were still some old and weak soldiers left in the family, they did not have much strength left. But as long as the 9 heavens and 9 earth demon punishing formation that Jun Moxie had set up in this period of time still existed, even if Zhan Lunhui came personally, he could only wander around in the formation, unable to enter. One chapter today. Everyone is not satisfied with the speed of the updates these few days. I know this, but I really can't burst out these few days. The knife was horizontal, and it hurt the moment I lowered my head. That feeling was as if my tendons had been cut short. The doctor strictly forbade me from writing. The updates these few days basically took 5 to 10 minutes to write, and then I had to stand up and rest for a long time. Only when there was no feeling would I continue to write. Even so, half of the knife was still torn the day before yesterday. Sometimes, when my emotions really came, I couldn't stop writing when I was really excited. I waited until my neck hurt, and then I wiped away the cold blood. I'm not complaining because I didn't want to say it. I yearn for everyone's understanding. This is my heartfelt words. These few days, I specially made a wooden frame and placed it on the bed, lying down and writing. But those who have had this kind of experience will know that lying down and writing feels even worse. Someone said, "You can burst out with a broken leg. Why are you so lazy after such a small wound?" Brother, that's a leg, not a neck. Don't talk about a broken leg. Even without a leg, you can still write. But a neck without a life, it's gone. Another brother said, "This guy is purposely acting pitiful during the surgery. He just wants everyone to pity him and reward him." I'm very speechless. This brother, just how retarded are you? You're purposely acting pitiful for me to see? This thing can be purposely injured during surgery? Is this even F asterisk king human? F asterisk CK. Chapter 1119. Unless Zhan Lunhui was as powerful as Miao Qingcheng and came with a heavenly tribulation, he might be able to forcefully destroy this formation. But Jun Moxie did not believe that Zhan Lunhui had such a cultivation. He did not believe that he had such guts. Because even if he could make use of the heavenly tribulation to destroy the formation, he would not be able to escape the fate of losing his life to the heavenly tribulation. Would a selfish bastard who harmed an outstanding descendant of his own family every few hundred years be willing to make such a sacrifice? At this point, everything had been arranged. Jun Moxie looked at the empty square and said calmly without turning his head, "Shuiyin, the two of us will also set off immediately to Mount Heaven's Saint." Mount Heaven's Saint? Aren't we going to the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains? Mei Shuiyin asked in surprise. "Shuiyin, this matter has far exceeded our original expectations. Now that the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, this natural barrier, has been completely destroyed and the natural barrier no longer exists, the strange race's monster army may endlessly invade the Xian continent. No matter what, we have to go and see, after the collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, just how much battle strength can the 3 holy lands still retain." Jun Moxie said lightly, "What I'm most worried about right now is that the 3 holy lands have been completely annihilated in this calamity or have lost too much of their combat power. That would be terrible to the extreme. It will be very difficult to win this war with just the strength of our family." Mei Shuiyin was enlightened. Jun Moxie had mobilized almost all of Tion Fa's elite forces for this reason. From this point alone, it could be said that Jun Mo Xie's foresight had already reached the extreme. But Jun Moxie sighed slowly. His original plan was to bring his men over the Pillar of Heaven's mountains after the war for seizing the heavens and enter the strange race's territory to slaughter to their heart's content. That way, no matter how they fought, no matter how much they destroyed, it would all be at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and it would not affect the Xian continent at all. If they really couldn't handle it, they would retreat and charge over again when the time was right. It could be said that they could attack and defend at will. However, before his wishful thinking could be carried out, there was an earth-shattering turn of events. All of Jun Dashao's strategic plans were ruined, especially the collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. It was even more unimaginable. Now that things had come to this, they could only brace themselves and charge forward. Also, there must be a reason why the Pillar of Heaven's mountains suddenly collapsed. Jun Moxie's gaze flickered lingling. That's a restriction personally set up by the Nine Nether First Young Master. How could it collapse so easily? There must be a reason behind this, and I believe that the people from the three holy lands definitely know the reason. In this world, the only person that Jun Moxie was truly wary of was the Nine Nether First Young Master. Other than him, even if it was the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, Miao Qing Cheng, Zhanlin Hui, Jun Dashao had absolute confidence that he could surpass them in a short period of time. Only the 9 Nether First Young Master's strength had truly reached an unfathomable height. After all, he was an existence that could fight against Hong Jun head-on. Although Jun Dashao was conceited and confident, he would not overestimate his own strength. If there was really someone who could destroy the restriction personally set up by the 9 Nether First Young Master, that person would definitely be a powerful enemy. After making a few more arrangements and leaving behind a plan to deal with the aftermath, Jun Moxie and Mei Shuyan immediately set off, rushing towards the source of this disaster, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Jun Moxie did not mobilize any flying Xian beasts to bring the two of them along. He only waved his hand and kept Mei Shuyan into the Hongjun Pagoda. Then, with a shake of his body, he activated the yin-yang escape, pushing his speed to the maximum and traversed through the air at top speed. 1,000 miles in an instant. High up in the sky, Jun Moxie sped through the air alone. In just 4 hours, he had already traversed a distance of no less than 3,000 miles. As he got closer to the site of the disaster, the temperature became hotter and hotter. Without a doubt, this was contrary to normal conditions. The reason was very obvious. It was a natural anomaly caused by this sudden calamity. High up in the sky, Jun Moxie gazed into the distance. The originally blurry black smoke at the end of the horizon had become clearer and clearer as he got closer. Looking at it, it was truly a ghastly sight. In just one morning, he had traversed 8,000 miles of clouds and moon. This kind of super high speed was definitely the fastest speed in this world. No one could surpass it. An entire day had passed. The distance to the site of a disaster was getting closer and closer. Jun Moxie could already see the thick smoke and dust in the distance, covering the sky and covering the boundless land. As far as the eye could see, there were close to 30 mountain peaks, all spewing out thick smoke. More than 30 volcanoes had erupted at the same time, and all the volcanoes were of a super large scale. No matter how daring Jun Moxie was, he could not help but suck in a breath of cold air when he saw such a scene. He had tried his best to overestimate the severity of this disaster, but he did not expect it to be this bad. Jun Moxie's current position was at least 2,000 miles away from the site of the disaster, but the oncoming heat wave was enough to make one's hair stand on end. The volcanic craters at the source of the disaster were still spewing out red magma. Occasionally, large rocks would be thrown into the sky and fall down like meteorites, leaving a crimson trail behind them. There's only one kind of smell left in the sky and on the ground, and this pungent smell filled the entire sky. The smoke from the eruption of volcanoes, that was something poisonous. Anyone who had studied chemistry would know this. Although the natives of Xian continent did not know, Jun Dashao knew. Even though he knew what it was, he did not know why it was happening. Fortunately, there were not many people in this vast area. Even if there were one or two small villages, they were scattered and not densely packed. However, the extent of the disaster this time was not small, and the scope of the disaster was still continuing to expand. Not to mention other things, just this poisonous smoke alone was surging towards the mainland, like thousands of galloping horses. If this really went over, it would be a calamity for all living beings. At this moment, the southwest wind was blowing, and the wind was fanning the flames and sending the poisonous smoke. That was really fast. Damn it! I was wondering why this young master was able to comprehend the power of wind and cloud at such a crucial moment. So that's how it is. June Moxie cursed but did not dare to be careless. He stood in the sky and shouted, "Power of wind! Reverse! Power of cloud! Roll!" With a wave of his hand, he pointed in the southwest direction. Gusts of gentle northern wind that shouldn't have appeared at this moment were quietly formed, and the wind grew stronger and stronger. In the end, it had already formed into an incomparably, piercingly cold and violent northern wind. As it whistled, it seemed as if it was sweeping through the entire heavens and the earth, and it faced the surging poisonous smoke in an extremely shrill manner. The weather was just right, and the southwest wind was naturally quite strong. But the sudden rise of the northeast wind was even more majestic, abundant, and unstoppable. It seemed like a standard heaven-defying order. The poisonous smoke that came from the southwest could be said to have formed a multicolored cloud that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. But the snow-white cloud that gathered in the northeast was even more majestic, as if it was charging forward without fear of death. It was as if two ancient fiend celestial gods were clashing in midair with countless celestial soldiers and generals. The clouds and smoke that were almost intangible collided with each other. There should not have been any sound, but at this moment, there was an inexplicable loud noise that could shake the heavens and earth, as if billions of living beings were roaring at the same time. Then the clouds and mist from both sides entangled with each other, and no one could move forward rashly. Both sides had lost their momentum, and there was no possibility of retreat. Suddenly, with a boom, they rushed straight up into the sky. After the loud bang, an indescribably huge mushroom cloud formed in the sky. It rose up in midair, and the most peculiar thing was that the mushroom cloud was actually half white and half black. The white part was as bright as snow, and the black part was as black as ink. It was really a spectacular sight. June Moxie raised his eyebrows and sighed. I believe that even if 1,000,000 atomic bombs were to explode at the same time, there probably wouldn't be such a spectacular mushroom cloud. Why don't I have a F** King camera now? If only I could take a picture. Crackle. The north wind was cold, and the south wind was hot. The two completely different winds collided with each other, and suddenly there was a burst of crackling lightning and the rumbling of thunder. Then fist-sized hailstones came crashing down. The impact caused the entire ground to rumble, and a thick mist rose up into the air. Evaporated. Once the power of wind and cloud was formed, it was really indomitable and would never stop. As the northeast wind blew, its momentum became stronger and stronger, and gradually increased to the 7th or 8th level. Finally, the southwest wind could not bear the heavy burden, and could only defend, and could no longer move forward. The northeast wind took advantage of the victory, and pursued, step by step, and finally, the poisonous smoke reversed. June Moxie gritted his teeth. F***CK. I was worried that I didn't have a good way to deal with you bastards. Watch me poison you strange races to death. Aren't you all conjoined twins? I'll let you all give birth to deformed mutants with 3 heads and 6 arms after smelling this poisonous smoke. Let me see. With a wave of his hand, the wind actually increased by another level. It had already reached the 9th level. At the 6th level, it was difficult to walk against the wind. At the 7th level, it was difficult to walk with an umbrella. At the 8th level, branches would break, and at the 9th level, the roof tiles would fly. When the wind reached the 9th level, it could cause a terrifying disaster in the human world. If it wasn't for the fact that this place was too remote and barren, and that June Moxie could freely control the direction of the wind, he wouldn't have so rashly thrown out a ninth-level wind. With the appearance of the ninth-level hurricane, the deadlock situation instantly changed. The southwest wind could no longer withstand it, and the army collapsed like a landslide. Following the mournful whistling of the north wind, countless balls of poisonous smoke rolled and covered the entire sky towards the southwest. Air, to be more accurate, it should be flying towards the settlement of the strange races of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. Chapter 1120. Today's first update. With the current speed, the second update will be in 2 hours. Along with the howling northern wind, the thick smoke that continued to gush out from the volcanoes also accelerated with the help of the surging wind, just that it was flowing in the opposite direction from the original direction. The wind and clouds surged, and the endless smoke was gradually pushed away. June Moxie could finally see the current situation of the dozens of volcanoes more clearly. Although the poisonous smoke had already been eliminated, the dozens of volcanoes were still continuously spewing out magma, shooting up hundreds of feet into the sky before falling down. No matter where it fell, it would turn into a charred mess. It was very obvious that the amount of energy that these dozens of volcanoes needed to release was too huge. Thousands of miles of red land. This word was truly well-deserved to be used here. Under such a violent rise in temperature, all the water sources within thousands of miles were decreasing at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. Many places had already started to show signs of cracking, and this situation was still worsening. Everyone could only watch this terrible situation that was caused by the power of the heavens and earth. It was as if they had experienced a great change in the blink of an eye. Such an incomparably strange and horrifying scene was actually happening. The visual impact that it brought to the onlookers was completely imaginable. It was incomparable, soul-stirring, and ghastly. It was likely that the three holy lands would not be able to avoid this calamity. June Moxie thought silently. The scope of the eruption of the volcanoes seemed to encompass all the areas around Mount Heaven Saint, and the three holy lands happened to be located in the most central area of the volcanoes. Such a calamity might have already flattened the entire Mount Heaven Saint. Even if there were survivors, how many could survive? June Moxie sighed in his heart. Suddenly, he thought of something. It seemed like his side had sent out troops too early. He had not expected that the eruption of the volcanoes this time would be so hot, and the destructive power would be so terrifying. The people of the three holy lands of Mount Heaven Saint would definitely suffer. But would the strange races be comfortable? It didn't make sense that the natural eruption of the volcanoes would only hit the people of Xian's side. He believed that the disaster on the other side must be severe as well. Moreover, the volcanic eruption covered such a large area. Although the people on this side couldn't cross, the people on the other side might not be able to cross. June Moxie secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Perhaps the large number of casualties this time could be reduced by a lot. If he and Mei Shuyan arrived with the hero, Eagle Bear, Alliance first, they should be able to avoid many unnecessary casualties. In fact, just based on the current situation, their side might not necessarily be at a disadvantage. Although they would fall into the disadvantage of fighting alone, they would also be able to avoid being hindered by the three holy lands. Many a time, an untrustworthy ally was far more dangerous than a powerful enemy. Based on the current situation, if they really lost the battle strength of the three holy lands, although their strength would be greatly reduced, they would also have less to worry about. June Moxie, who was rejoicing in his heart, suddenly saw the smoke in front of him tremble. A black dot flew out of the smoke with a whoosh. It flew against the raging north wind and made an unusually shrill sound as it tore through the air. June Moxie's pupils constricted as he'd already swiftly recognized that the black dot was a person. A person. In this world, in terms of cultivation, the personal disciple of a nine-nether first young master, Miao Qing Cheng, was naturally the highest. But Miao Qing Chung had gone into hiding due to the threat of the heavenly tribulation. Apart from Miao Qing Chung, who else could have such abilities? The so-called number one in the world, the 9 serenities and 14 masters, could be considered as one. But this person was obviously not the 9 serenities and 14 masters. And this person's strength might not necessarily be weaker than the 9 serenities and 14 masters, or even stronger. Since these two people had already been eliminated, there was only one candidate left in Jun Moxie's heart. The only candidate, Jean Luen Hui. Then behind that figure, a total of dozens of figures flew out one after another. Behind that figure, they chased after him with all their might. Even though they were extremely far away from each other and couldn't see the faces of those people clearly, they could clearly feel the tragic atmosphere in the air. The feeling the people at the back gave off was that as long as they could catch up to the person in front, even if they had to bite him, spit on him, and then die, they would have no regrets. This was an irreconcilable enmity. The figures flew closer and closer, and in the blink of an eye, they could already vaguely see the face of the person in front. Jun Moxie narrowed his eyes and focused his gaze. Jean Luen Hui, it's really him. And the group of people chasing after him was also very familiar to Jun Moxie. It was none other than those seniors from Heaven's Saint Palace. The person in the lead was the boss of Heaven's Saint Palace, that old monster who had lived for over 3,000 years, Guhan. And this Guhan was only a name for these 3,000 years. That identity 3,000 years ago was called Wu Shan Yun. Right now, Guhan's face was frosty, and he looked extremely furious. His clothes were torn all over, and he looked extremely wretched. He no longer had the sage-like demeanor he had when he first saw Jun Da Xiao. But his eyes were like lightning, and he did not slow down at all. Right now, he was clearly using some sort of self-mutilation method to burn his potential in order to raise his speed to the maximum so that he could catch up to the fleeing Jean Luen Hui in the shortest time possible. Other than that, it seemed like Guhan did not even consider his own life. A thought flashed through Jun Moxie's mind. This Jean Luen Hui most likely has something to do with the collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. Otherwise, with a person like Guhan, he would not be angered to such an extent. Jean Luen Hui continued flying ahead, not even turning his head back. Suddenly, Guhan hollered, "Zhang Kuang, do you think this seat doesn't recognize you by running away like this? As a senior of the Xian continent, you are so deranged, destroying the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains and shaking the foundations of the Xian continent. You deserve to die." This explosive shout was truly like a thunderclap in spring, and it shook the space in an area of a few thousand kilometers to the point of droning. The echoes continued without end, and it seemed as if even the air had trembled and surged because of this enormous bang. Between the heavens and the earth, numerous veined patterns that were like ripples of water appeared, and then they vanished. Jean Luen Hui continued flying at full speed, increasing his speed instead of slowing down. "Zhang Kuang, you can't run. Even if you can run, where can the Zhang family run to? You have committed such a heinous crime. You are making the entire Xian continent your enemy." Guhan hollered angrily. "Stop now. Return to the ancestral tablets and atone for your sins with your death. Perhaps the entire Zhang family will not be implicated because of you alone." But Jean Luen Hui flew even faster. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes. This Guhan really knew how to talk, telling me to stop obediently, to follow you back, and then atone for my sins with my death. It would be strange if he didn't run even faster after saying such words. People say that the older a person is, the more wisdom and experience they have accumulated. But why would this old demon who had lived for at least 3,000 years say such childish words? In the blink of an eye, Jean Luen Hui had already charged to within 5,000 zhang of Jun Moxie, and Guhan and the rest were also about this distance from Jean Luen Hui. 5,000 zhang. Jun Mo Xie's heart skipped a beat, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. Making a quick decision, he flipped his body, and with a dragon's roar, the blood of yellow flame appeared in his hand. Jean Luen Hui was filled with regret as he sprinted. This time, he had sacrificed over 100 top experts of the Jean family in order to recover more than half of his strength. This time, he had come for a great secret in the Heaven Saint Palace. That secret was the source of the mysterious substance that maintained the functioning of the Misty Mansion. His goal was simple. He wanted to get more of this thing back. Then, the Jean family would use this thing as a bargaining chip to completely suppress the Miao family in the Misty Mansion and then stabilize their position as the leader of the Misty Mansion. His goal could be said to be very simple, or even very simple. In fact, he had already decided that after successfully obtaining this thing from the Heaven Saint Palace, he would make a trip to the Tian Fa forest and eliminate that lawless brat. He only wanted that thing and had no intention of becoming enemies with the Three Holy Lands. And that brat was someone that the Three Holy Lands wanted to eliminate no matter what. By eliminating this brat, he might be able to resolve the grudge between him and the Three Holy Lands this time. As for that evil monarch, what young saint venerable expert? In front of me, Jean Luen Hui, they are all nothing. But he had never imagined that he had taken too much of that mysterious substance this time, causing the seal that the Nine Nether First Young Master had set to lose its balance, and the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had collapsed because of it. Jean Luen Hui knew that he had gotten himself into big trouble and quickly fled. As long as he wasn't caught on the spot, he believed that there would still be room for negotiation. But how would he know that with such a huge incident happening, Gu Han and the rest were even thinking of committing suicide? How would it let him go? After a series of intense battles, Jean Luen Hui finally escaped. But the people of the Heaven Saint Palace continued to pursue him relentlessly, even resorting to self-mutilation to not let the matter rest. But Jean Luen Hui was ultimately a veteran expert. His strength was truly extraordinary. Gu Han and the rest could not compare to his understanding, control, and utilization of Heaven-Earth Yuan Qi. Even if Gu Han used self-mutilation to increase his speed, he was still unable to close the distance between them. Seeing that the distance between them was getting further and further, as long as he could escape safely, then everything would be fine. Just because you say I'm Zhang Kuang, then I'm Zhang Kuang? I'll refuse to admit it, even to my death. What do you do to me? Jean Luen Hui knew that this incident was no small matter, and he was already planning to act shamelessly. Otherwise, even his master, Miao Qing Cheng, the only person left in the entire Xian continent, would not be able to bear the responsibility of this incident. But then again, the location of this disaster was the Xian continent, and it did not have much to do with the Misty Mansion. The amount of necessities he had obtained this time was considerable, enough to last the Misty Mansion for 10,000 years. So what if the Xian continent really fell? The Mountain of Men was right in front of him. After crossing this mountain, he would be able to enter the Misty Mansion at any time. At that time, even if they had heaven-defying abilities, they would not be able to do anything to me. Chapter 1121. The distance of 100 zhang was covered in the blink of an eye for Jean Luen Hui, who was running at full speed. Just as this thought popped up in his mind, he had already charged to within 800 zhang of the area. Just at this moment, the heavens and earth suddenly changed color. An unparalleled sword, bringing with it a huge sword light that connected the heavens and earth, slashed down toward Jean Luen Hui's head. At the same time, a total of 18 spatial shackles were thrown out in quick succession in this entire area. The sword light was like lightning, covering the heavens and earth. In front of this blinding sword light, even the blazing sun in the sky seemed to have lost its color. It became dark and gloomy. This sword light that came out of nowhere was so dazzling and brilliant, as if a bolt of lightning that connected the heavens and earth had suddenly appeared in the deep night sky. Jean Luen Hui, who was focused on escaping, was completely unprepared for this sudden change. The entire world that he could see was instantly filled with this earth-shattering sword light. This sword came out of nowhere, without any warning, and it was hard for anyone to predict and guard against it. Just a moment ago, his heart was filled with the joy of successfully escaping from danger. But now, there was only a tyrannical sword light that could kill any existence in front of him. Such a powerful sword was not only decisive, but also decisive, deciding life and death. Life and death were separated by a hair's breadth. Jean Luen Hui was also shocked, but his 10,000 years of experience was not to be underestimated. He quickly reacted and roared, maintaining his speed of movement. But the direction he was moving in suddenly changed from straight to horizontal, rising by at least 100 zhang. The 18 spatial shackles that Jun Moxie had set up earlier, in hopes of restricting the space he could use to escape to, did not affect Jean Luen Hui at all. He broke through them easily. Not only did he break through the barrier, he even did a spatial leap and rose 100 feet into the air. His speed of charging forward was actually maintained, and he was almost completely unaffected. Luckily, Jean Luen Hui was not a god. Almost unaffected did not mean that he was completely unaffected. In the instant he changed his direction, that brilliant sword light also changed its trajectory. The tip of the sword jumped slightly and then rose up, charging up like a shadow. Not only did its power not decrease, it even increased. Jean Luen Hui's face darkened, and he finally stood still. If it wasn't for that moment of obstruction, he was confident that he could get rid of this sword principle with his speed. However, if he insisted on escaping, he would be ambushed by the sword light. No matter how fast a person was, it was impossible to be faster than the sword chi released by an expert of the same level. Right now, although there was still no one in front of him, but Jean Luen Hui knew clearly that he had met with a formidable opponent. This person's control over the sword had obviously reached a rather terrifying level. He could be said to have the attainments of a grandmaster. Jean Luen Hui's evaluation of Jun Moxie was obviously very high. Facing such an opponent, if one were to cower in fear, it would undoubtedly cause a flaw in one's perfect mental state. So Jean Luen Hui suddenly stopped charging in the air, and then both his palms met that sword light head-on. The dazzling sword light shot out like a rainbow. His momentum did not change, and he brazenly charged forward. Fire! The palm wind burst out like a mountain torrent. With a boom, it collided with the brilliant sword light. But another change occurred. The Imperial Void sword let out a light cry and suddenly spun rapidly in the air, like a spiral drill, breaking through layer after layer of Jean Luen Hui's palm wind, reaching the throat in an instant. Jean Luen Hui only felt a chill in his throat, and goosebumps rose all over his body from the agitation of the spiraling sword chi. He roared and quickly retreated. Then he leaped up. He charged a full 500 zhang into the air. At that moment of life and death, he actually broke free from the deadly seal of the sword. After confirming that he was safe, he realized that he was sweating profusely. Luckily, he did not underestimate his opponent just now, and overestimated his opponent as much as possible. He had held back a portion of his strength when he attacked, and was able to retreat in time. Otherwise, this body would have turned into a corpse after that attack. It might not even be a corpse. It would have turned into minced meat, or even dust. This was the first time in thousands of years that Jean Luen Hui had encountered such a dangerous situation. It was truly a matter of life and death. That sword drew out another mysterious trajectory that was filled with the laws of heaven and earth, and came charging over fiercely again. It was clear that it was not going to let him off easily. But Jean Luen Hui had already gathered all his Xian Qi and was ready to strike. Through that exchange just now, he knew that the other party was extremely powerful, but his true cultivation was still lacking compared to him. If they were to fight face to face, he still had a chance of winning. But it was a pity that the only thing that could affect this situation was not that demonic divine sword. Because at this moment, there was a sudden whistling sound in front of him, and a completely black, narrow, sharp sword, mixed with an indescribable evil aura, similarly appeared abruptly in front of him. As if a vengeful ghost was haunting him, endless resentment rose up. This kind of attack, this kind of evil feeling, it was so familiar to Jean Lunhui. Only someone from that place could have such an attack. 9 serenities and 14 masters? Jean Lunhui was truly shocked this time. That divine sword had indeed caught him off guard, and he was in a perilous situation. But through that short exchange just now, Jean Lunhui was certain that he still had the confidence to shake off the owner of that divine sword. But the sudden intervention of a 9 serenities and 14 masters had completely destroyed his confidence. He flipped his hand, and a shining long sword finally appeared in his hand. Even when facing the deadly attacks of all the experts of Heaven's Saint Palace, Jean Lunhui did not take out his weapon. But now that the 9 nether frost blade appeared, Jean Lunhui immediately drew his sword. The attack of the 9 serenities and 14 masters was not that easy to take on. Jean Lunhui had fought with one of the 9 nether young masters before. Even with his high cultivation, he had died several times in that exchange. So he naturally knew how difficult it was to deal with these lunatics. With a loud bang, Jean Lunhui was forced back several dozen zhang under the pincer attack of the 2 swords. Jun Moxie was also shocked by Jean Lunhui's cry of 9 serenities and 14 masters. F***CK, it was clearly this young master who attacked you. What has it got to do with that lunatic? But to Jun Dashao, this kind of benign misunderstanding was the more the better. Misunderstanding? The more serious the misunderstanding, the better. If I don't kill him today, then I'll let this fellow fight it out with the 9 serenities and 14 masters another day. Anyway, that fellow has nothing better to do. Since he has nothing better to do for the safety of the world and the people of the continent, isn't it good to contribute a little? Since when did this young master become so benevolent and righteous? So Jun Moxie became more and more pleased with himself. But he did not say a word, maintaining his invisible state of attack. The 9 nether frost blades in his hands were ever-changing. Sometimes, there were tens of 9 nether frost blades attacking at the same time, causing Jean Lunhui to howl in frustration. And there was also the blood of yellow flame, which had its own attack consciousness. Jean Lunhui was instantly suppressed into a disadvantageous position. He could only parry the attacks and had no way to retaliate. The prerequisite to retaliate was to have a target to retaliate against. But right now, where was the target? And these 2 methods of attack were too strange. It was so strange that even with Jean Lunhui's vast knowledge and experience, he was completely at a loss about it. Just what kind of attack was this? These 2 types of swords were clearly unleashed using the Imperial Sword technique, but how could the Imperial Sword technique be so agile and have such subtle changes? Previously, the Imperial Void Divine Blade was truly free and unrestrained, advancing and retreating as if it was a living sword. As for the 9 nether frost blade, its changes were even more bizarre, as if it was being personally controlled by someone, but there was clearly no one around. Based on the situation before him, Jean Lunhui's judgment was very accurate. All the signs pointed to an expert controlling the Imperial Sword technique from afar, and his analysis was not wrong either. The 9 nether frost blade was indeed being controlled by someone, but Jean Lunhui could not see or sense the person controlling it. As for the blood of yellow flame, this time, Jun Moxie was letting the blood of yellow flame attack on its own. Ever since it had swallowed the blood essence of several saint venerables, Jun Moxie had also used the power of gold to refine the blood of yellow flame 3 to 4 times. And now, the blood of yellow flame that had become a peerless divine weapon was actually starting to show off. It was flying around in the Hongjun Pagoda for fun, and it was extremely fast. Furthermore, Jun Moxie had used the Hongjun Pagoda's blood essence refinement technique for this latest round of tempering. He had infused all of his understanding of the way of the sword, as well as the sword techniques in his memory into it. Did the man understand the sword? Or did the sword understand the sword? Jun Moxie had provided the most complete and adequate explanation for this problem. This result had caused the blood of yellow flame's Tao of the sword to surpass its master, Jun Moxie, by a level. and this trend was still expanding. After all, Jun Dashao had too many matters to attend to, and the blood of yellow flame had truly nothing but the sword. Every time he saw the crystallization of his blood, sweat, and tears flying around in front of him, displaying many exquisite sword techniques that he couldn't even think of or use, Jun Dashao felt like banging his head against a wall. Could it be that he was trapped in a cocoon of his own making? Damn it, being looked down upon by a sword. How depressing. Right now, the blood of Yellow Flame's intelligence was only at the level of a 14 or 15-year-old youth. But its understanding of the Tao of the sword was something that even those old fellows who had immersed themselves in the Tao of the sword for tens, hundreds, or even thousands of years could not compare to. If the sword demon, Dugu Chobai, was here right now, he would definitely lament under this sword. Since there is you, how can there be Liang? Since there is Chobai, how can there be Yin Huang? I say, I've spent more than 8 hours writing for 2 chapters today. Does anyone believe me? Today is the Dragon Boat Festival. I wish brothers and sisters a happy Dragon Boat Festival. Family reunion. Blissful happiness. Chapter 1122. The blood of Yellow Flame's strength was shocking, but it was filled with an indescribable dependence on Jun Dashao. To make an analogy, it was like a child who had obtained great power and was showing it off in front of its kin. When Jun Dashao had nothing to do, it would fly out on its own and circle around Jun Dashao twice. It could circle if it wanted, but it just had to circle around Jun Dashao's crotch and circle around. It was having a lot of fun. The blood of Yellow Flame was having a lot of fun, satisfied and happy. But a certain someone was even more depressed, even panicking. After all, that place was at a place for a divine weapon to wander around so casually. It wouldn't even be able to bear a few cuts. Jun Dashao had to forcefully use the sword technique to get this fellow, and every time. This sword technique was like the Monkey King's curse. If not for this thing, Jun Dashao would probably be scared to the point of impotence by this sword. How could he not feel the chill in his heart? How could he not be afraid that feeling as a man? Who could endure it, No one could be an exception. So this time, Jun Moxie directly let go after the sword left his hand. All he did was instill a strand of divine sense into it. This guy is a super baddie. Sword him properly. Take care of him, and there will be heavy rewards. Heavy rewards. These words were extremely tempting to the blood of Yellow Flame. Also, this person in front of me seems to be quite powerful. If I can devour this person's cultivation, how much will this sword improve? So this sword charged forward excitedly, circling around Zhang Luanhui and slashing, stabbing, and stabbing. This person had a sword technique, and no matter how exquisite it was, there would always be a sequence to it. But the path of this sword, no one knew if there were any traces left on the sword, but from the looks of Zhang Luanhui right now, this super expert with 18,000 years of experience had yet to find it. Zhang Luanhui was frantically paying attention to that person wielding the sword from behind. All his attention was focused on that powerful enemy. He completely did not expect that all these attacks were from this sword. He was just wondering, why is the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters so good now? The 9 Nether Frost Blades attack was fine, but the Imperial Void Divine Edge was too sharp, too miraculous, too demonic. Zhang Luanhui's sword danced in the air, and the sounds of clanging and clanging filled the air. The more he fought, the more he felt that this world was changing too quickly. There was actually someone who could wield 2 swords at the same time and use completely different moves. Furthermore, every single one of those moves was extremely complicated, and he had never seen any of them before. If this person was not fighting with him, and he was in such a pathetic state, Zhang Luanhui would have the urge to cheer loudly. This level of swordsmanship was truly at the pinnacle of perfection, and had reached the acme of perfection. The way the 9 Nether Frostblade was used was exquisite, but there were still minute traces that could be captured. But the sharp moves of that Imperial Void Divine Edge had completely dazzled Zhang Luanhui. There was actually someone who could stab out 1,800 swords in the blink of an eye, without the sword moving at all. And every sword was fast and ruthless, accurate and swift. And they were all stabbing in different directions. This sword was aimed at the crown of his head, and the next sword was aimed at his Yonquan meridian. This sword was aimed at his heart, and the next sword was aimed at his back. This sword was like the explosion of thunder, extremely fierce and ferocious, and the next sword was like the spring breeze, extremely gentle. If that was all, it would still be fine. The most terrifying thing was that all the attacks were abnormally balanced, almost completely the same. No, the word almost needed to be removed. It was completely the same. What kind of precise control was required to achieve this? What kind of F**king monster was this sword user? Jean-Louis Hui almost wanted to curse out loud. Wasn't this method of attack and control a little too strange? This completely defied logic. Putting himself in Jean-Louis Hui's shoes, even for a top expert like him, not to mention the strength of the wrist, arm, and Xianxi required to stab out 1,000 swords in an instant with the same amount of force, just the constant change of direction of attack, and using a completely different type of energy was enough to cause an expert like Jean-Louis Hui to go berserk several times in an instant. However, the attacks in front of him were actually able to maintain a state of continuous, tide-like, never-ending attacks. It was as if the person wielding the sword did not know fatigue and did not expend any energy. Or perhaps it was as if he was playing a joke with his own body. Could it be that the martial arts of the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters had reached such a shocking level? In such a short period of time, Jean-Louis Hui's body had already been stabbed hundreds of times. If not for the fact that Jean-Louis Hui's physical body had already reached a level where even the 7 heavenly tribulations could not damage it, it was 1,000 times denser than steel. Even with the sharpness of the blood of yellow flame, Jean-Louis Hui could not pierce through it when he used all his strength and defended with all his might. In fact, if not for this, Jean-Louis Hui's physical body would have already turned into a sky full of minced meat. But this kind of consumption was also huge. How many battles had Jean-Louis Hui gone through in these dozens of reincarnations? But there had never been a time where he was in such a pathetic state. But right now, he could not vent his anger, because he had no target to vent his anger on. He did not know where the enemy was. There were a few times when he was almost 100% sure that the enemy was behind that sword. But when he attacked with all his might, all his attacks hit thin air. And once Xianxi was used for defense, then he could not increase his speed at the same time. In the end, he was trapped on the spot. Not only was he unable to move forward, but he was also pushed back by the other party's attacks. Jean-Louis Hui's clothes were already in tatters, barely covering his body. What should and shouldn't be exposed was basically all exposed. Actually, this was also within reason. The blood of yellow flame liked to hang around a certain spot, and that spot was a fatal spot of the human body. It was only right to pay more attention to it. One had to admit that this old monster Jean-Louis Hui was really impressive. That spot was a place that was extremely difficult to reach with Xianxi, but it was protected by this old fellow so strongly that even the blood of yellow flame could not damage it. 9 Serenities and 14 Masters. You claim to be the #1 expert in the world. Show yourself if you have the guts. Fight with this old man fair and square. What kind of hero are you, hiding your head and showing your tail like this, displaying some shameful moves? Could it be that your 9 nether lineage only knows these shameful moves? Aren't you afraid of bringing shame to the name of the first young master? Jean-Louis Hui scolded loudly. If this was any other time, Jean-Louis Hui would not be afraid. It was a mutual consumption of Xianxi. But with the opponent's high frequency of attacks, the consumption might not be small. And with such a strange attack route, it would further exhaust his stamina and mental energy. Jean-Louis Hui was confident that no one in this world could outlast him. But while he was not afraid of this battle, there was a large group of top experts following behind him, and all of them were top experts who were determined to fight him to the death. If he could not resolve this predicament quickly, it would be truly difficult for him to escape when they arrived. June Moxie was in the void, feeling so good that he was about to cry out in satisfaction. But he was still imitating the voice of the 9 serenities and 14 masters, snorting coldly. It was really similar. It was like a gust of cold wind had suddenly blown out from the depths of hell, and also like the sigh of a ghost. Then June Moxie said coldly, "You think you're worthy? You can't even find this seat's true body. So what right do you have to fight me head on?" If he had not spoken, Jean Luen Hui would not have been so angry. But June Dashao snorted. This snort made Jean Luen Hui certain of his identity, and so Jean Luen Hui's anger grew, and he could no longer contain it. If he had only snorted, it would have been nothing. But after that snort, he said with the demeanor of an expert, "You think you're worthy?" This sentence drove Jean Luen Hui crazy with anger. What was Jean Luen Hui's identity? In the entire Xianxian continent, other than Miao Qing Cheng, there was no one else who had a higher seniority and a higher status than him. Other than Miao Qing Cheng, in terms of Xianxi cultivation, Jean Luen Hui was the strongest in the entire continent. And Miao Qing Cheng could not appear in the world right now. So Jean Luen Hui was the person who stood at the peak of this world. Although the 9 serenities and 14 masters was known as the #1 in the world, but Jean Luen Hui did not even put him in his eyes. This kind of status, this kind of strength, and yet he was looked down upon to the extreme and said, "You think you're worthy?" Jean Luen Hui roared angrily, almost vomiting blood from anger. With a loud roar, the sword in his hand suddenly turned into thousands of rays of cold light as he counterattacked with all his might. The battle between the two of them became more and more intense, but the entire process did not take long. After all, their speed had already reached a level that ordinary people could not even touch. But with just this one delay, the situation became even more unfavorable to Jean Luen Hui. There was no other reason. The experts of Heaven's Saint Palace had already caught up. Gu Han and the rest had chased up with righteous indignation, only to realize that someone had single-handedly provoked Jean Luen Hui and blocked him here. They could not help but feel shocked, followed by disbelief. What kind of person was Jean Luen Hui? Everyone had just exchanged blows with him, so they were all very clear about this point. Although they despised Jean Luen Hui's character to the extreme, but they were all impressed by his cultivation. Previously, even when Gu Han and the rest joined forces, a total of over 34th level Holy Emperor experts, over a dozen Saint Venerables, and 3 or 4 above Saint Venerables. They could only defeat him and not kill him, much less make him stay. They could not even seriously injure him. Chapter 11:23. He was even forced into a disadvantageous position where he could not retaliate at all. And at the same time, the person who intercepted him did not even reveal his shadow. What kind of strength did this person possess? When everyone sensed the 9 Nether Frostblade and heard Jean Luen Hui's roar, Gu Han and the rest had even more complicated expressions. This person was the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters. This lunatic. So the true strength of the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters was actually this powerful. But he had no feud with Jean Luen Hui, so why did he obstruct a super expert like Jean Luen Hui? This was tantamount to giving a huge favor to his enemies. Gu Han, the leader of the group, felt even more complicated, but he also knew that this was not the time to consider this. Jean Luen Hui had destroyed the restrictions, causing the pillar of Heaven's mountains to completely collapse, and even caused the volcanoes to erupt. The 10,000 years of foundation of the 3 holy lands was completely destroyed. And the most terrifying consequence was that the natural barrier that blocked the invasion of the strange races was completely gone. All of this was destroyed by Jean Luen Hui's reckless actions. After fighting with June Moxie for so long, there were quite a number of deaths. But it was not as thorough and tragic as Jean Luen Hui's. More than half of the people of the 3 holy lands had died in this calamity. Among the 3 holy lands, the Hermitage bore the brunt of it. Countless beautiful palaces had already turned into a sea of lava. Other than Mo Wudao, who led less than 400 people out, no one else survived. The illusory blood sea was not in a good state either. It was smashed by the collapsing pillar of heaven's mountains and almost entirely smashed onto it. Sect Master Hian Ao Bo only managed to escape with his life under the protection of several experts of his sect. However, there were less than 500 people who escaped with him. Half of them were injured and crippled. It was even more miserable than the elusive world of immortals. The servants and family members of the two holy lands numbered in the tens of thousands, but not a single one escaped. Including the old and the young, men and women, they were all turned into scorched earth and smoke. Among them, there were many experts who perished in this calamity in order to save their families. The Great Golden City was located slightly further away. It could be said that they were lucky enough to be less affected. Although there were many casualties in the process, the overall loss of combat power was not too big. More than 2,000 masters who were the main battle masters managed to escape. 10,000 years of foundation destroyed in a day. Tens of thousands of experts died a violent death. Even in the Heaven Saint Palace of the Heaven Saint Mountain, 2 of the Holy Emperor's experts perished because of this sudden disaster. Not a single stock of spirit medicine survived. 10,000 years of accumulation turned into nothingness. The Ling Long Lotus Pond also collapsed and turned into ashes. What a disastrous loss this was. It was often said that it was good as long as there were people. But the things that the Heaven Saint Palace and the 3 Holy Lands possessed were truly more precious than talents. And this accident happened a month before the war for seizing the heavens. This was equivalent to announcing the death penalty of the entire Xian continent. The billions of lives of the Xian continent were about to be completely exposed to the bloody butcher knives of the strange races. The 3 Holy Lands, as the mainstays of the continent, had their combat power weakened by more than 80% before the war. And that natural moat that separated the 2 lands had now become a smooth road. All of this was caused by Zhang Luanhui. This level of hatred could no longer be described as irreconcilable. This was a blood feud that could not be resolved for generations to come. The hearts of everyone from the 3 Holy Lands were dripping blood. Even if they had to go to the ends of the world, Guhan and the rest would never let Zhang Luanhui off. Zhang Quang, this main culprit. Guhan waved his hand, and the peak experts from the Heaven Saint Palace who had rushed over formed a large circle, surrounding the 2 people who were fighting. Everyone looked at Zhang Luanhui with eyes filled with crazed hatred. However, the battle that unfolded in front of them immediately attracted everyone's attention. A battle between 1 person and 3 swords. Or rather, it could be said that a battle between 1 person wielding 1 sword and 2 other swords. Oh no, to be more accurate, it should be a battle with a group of swords. Zhang Luanhui, who was almost naked and had disheveled hair, was dancing in the air alone, shouting loudly. His sword light was like lightning, like rain, like a waterfall. In front of his body, a sword flew here and there, occasionally releasing a rain of swords, attacking Zhang Luanhui in a frenzied manner. And a black 9-nether frostblade would appear from time to time. Every attack would land on the weakest spot of Zhang Luanhui's defense. From start to end, there was no one controlling them. But these 2 swords were clearly controlled by someone in the dark, and it was an extremely skilled sword expert. It was a miraculous sword manipulation technique. This level of precise control. Looking at the ever-changing attacks, Guhan and the rest all sucked in a cold breath of air, feeling ashamed of their inferiority. And every attack of that majestic divine blade seemed to be infused with the essence of the way of the sword. Every time he spun around, every time he dodged, there was a mysterious and indescribable feeling to it. No one would be able to withstand such an attack that was filled with the laws of heaven and earth. Even if he was the existence closest to the pinnacle of this world. Everyone watched silently as the battle unfolded. Their hearts were in turmoil, if not for the fact that Zhang Luanhui's defenses had reached an unbelievable level. he would have died long ago. And in such a situation, if he failed to defend, he would be smashed into smithereens. But the situation of the battle was not optimistic. The 9 serenities and 14 masters who was controlling the swords in the dark was undoubtedly powerful, but his weakness was also exposed. Clearly, his skills were not as profound as Jean-Louis Huey's. The final winner of this battle of attrition might not be him. It was obvious that his skills were not as profound as Jean-Louis Huey's. The final winner of this war of attrition might not be him. This battle was filled with the color of supremacy. Be it Jean-Louis Huey or that sword, both had an air of arrogance. Both Jean-Louis Huey and that sword exuded an air of arrogance. The aura they exuded and the aura they exuded clearly showed this. No one could interfere. No one could interfere. Anyone who interfered would become the common enemy of both sides. And in truth, there was no room for a third party to interfere in a battle like this. It was understandable that Jean-Louis Huey was afraid of being surrounded and attacked by everyone. But why was that Imperial Void Divine Sword also emitting such a cold and hostile aura? If everyone rushed up to take care of Jean-Louis Huey at this moment, not only would it be a happy ending, it would also be the easiest way to resolve the situation with the least number of variables. A battle of attrition would only lead to countless unforeseen circumstances. But facing that powerful divine blade, no one dared to interfere. Once they interfered, it would mean that they were looking down on the Swordmaster. The experts of Heaven's Saint Palace did not dare to offend this Grandmaster of the Way of the Sword at this critical juncture. A certain Grandmaster of the Way of the Sword, Jun Moxie, was about to explode from anger. Jun Dashao had never been one to follow the rules of the pugilistic world. As long as he could defeat his enemy, that was the best method. Therefore, sneak attacks, plots, poisons, and other despicable methods were not too stressful for him. If the blood of Yellow Flame was in his hands, Jun Dashao would have already raised his arms and shouted, "Everyone attack together! Chop this old fellow into pieces!" But right now, the blood of Yellow Flame was attacking on its own. Although it was stronger than in his hands, this fellow was still arrogant. To actually be so particular about the demeanor of a gentleman and talk about a fair battle. And he seemed to be excited to see the prey. He even seemed to be repulsed by the 9 nether frost blade in Jun Moxie's hands. And the most infuriating thing was that this fellow wanted to fight Jean-Louis alone. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to monopolize it. Big brother, this is a war, What kind of heroism are you trying to show? Among everyone here, only you can absorb the essence of a Xianqi cultivator. Jun Moxie glared furiously. If not for the fact that he was afraid of exposing his identity, he would have already screamed out loud. He decided in his heart, after this battle, I'll definitely teach the blood of Yellow Flame a good lesson and let him properly understand the spirit. At such a crucial moment, to drop the ball and be so stubborn, Jun Moxie sighed deeply. Actually, Jun Dashao was also clear that this result was caused by him, and he couldn't blame anyone else. It was already described in the Hongjun Pagoda. The saber is the emperor of all weapons. The sword is the monarch of all weapons. A dignified and imposing sword is the sword of a gentleman. A dignified teacher must not take risks and do things that are treacherous. There are thousands of weapons in the world, but only the sword can be called a gentleman. The sword of a gentleman is arrogant, proud and aloof under the heavens, looking down on the wind and clouds. It is the supreme emperor of the sword. When the sword is used, it is dignified. The tricks of the treacherous sword may be successful for a while, but it will not be able to dominate the world. Remember, the blood of Yellow Flame could be said to have fully digested, understood, and absorbed the concept of the gentleman of the sword, and it even carried it to greater heights. That was why the blood of Yellow Flame Divine Sword was so tyrannical in this battle. Jean-Louis Huey roared madly and suddenly leaped up, completely out of character. He completely ignored the terrifying attack of the Void War Divine Sword and leaped up without a care for anything. The blood of Yellow Flame had already cut 7 wounds on his body in an instant. Before the blood could even flow out, the wounds had already healed. June Moxie's 9 nether frostblade had also stabbed him 3 times from top to bottom. A stab to the forehead, a stab to the heart, and a stab to the dantian. But they only went 3 inches in before they were repelled. Then the skin that was pierced also returned to its original state in an instant. Jean Luen Hui charged 100 zhong and suddenly roared into the sky. His black hair blew up as he stood motionlessly in the air with his hands behind his back, looking down coldly at the 2 swords that were charging up. He said expressionlessly, "Very good. 9 serenities and 14 masters. You have really succeeded in angering me this time. In the last 10,000 years, there has never been anyone who could make this old man look so pathetic and disheveled. You should be proud to be able to do this. Even if you die today, you will not have wasted your position as the #1 expert of the Xian continent." Chapter 1124. Jean Luen Hui's long black hair flew in the air, like seaweed at the bottom of the sea that had encountered a tsunami. His eyes were like lightning, his face expressionless, but a tyrannical aura rose from his body. He was almost completely naked, with only a few strands of cloth hanging on his body. He should have looked extremely wretched in this state, but Jean Luen Hui had regained his majestic aura, like a god descending to the mortal world. This godly and demonic aura only took less than 1/10 of the time it took to blink an eye from the moment it appeared to spread throughout the world. But the entire space within a 10,000 li radius was filled with this extremely domineering aura. "Since you've gone too far, this old man shall give you a taste of my prowess. Let you understand that there's always someone stronger than you out there." Jean Luen Hui smiled lingling. His body suddenly spun, and a tornado formed under his feet. It was like a Tyrannosaurus had charged out from the ground, sweeping through the heavens and wrapping everything within it. The tornado rose, and a greenish-blue aura burst out from Jean Luen Hui's body. Suddenly, thousands of Jean Luen Hui's shadows appeared in the world. "It's the heaven-mad battle dragon. Retreat quickly." Guhan's face changed as he called out. The heaven-mad battle dragon was the move that made Jean Luen Hui famous when he was still Jean Quang. The power of this move was said to be unparalleled. Jean Luen Hui had once used this move to fight against the 9 nether young masters, and he had the upper hand. The greatest power of this move was that it could create countless cracks in the space around it. As long as one was hit by it, no matter which crack they fell into, they would not be able to return. Even if it was someone stronger than Jean Luen Hui, they would be at a disadvantage if they met with this move. Back then, it was Jean Quang's move that made Jean Luen Hui an absolute forbidden move. This move was also Jean Quang's ultimate killing move. Although the 9 nether 14th young master, who was fighting with Jean Luen Hui, was an enemy of the 3 holy lands, it was precisely because he had stopped Jean Luen Hui that the people of Heaven's Saint Palace had successfully formed an encirclement. On this point, the people of Heaven's Saint Palace had undoubtedly owed him a huge favor. Thus, Guhan could not sit back and watch. But the huge tornado that Jean Luen Hui had formed suddenly exploded in the next moment. Due to the explosion, the countless light spots that appeared instantly evolved into countless pitch-black spatial cracks in the area where the power of the explosion spread across the entire world. It was filled with the aura of death and destruction. At the same time, the countless Jean Luen Hui shadows surged out from all directions, attacking indiscriminately without a target. The area covered by the blood of yellow flame and the 9 nether frostblade was extremely vast. Jean Luen Hui's goal was simple. As long as they were within this area, they were destined to not be able to escape this wave of attacks. No one could control a sword to attack from 1,000 feet away and still be so agile. Not even Miao Qingsheng could do it. If there was really someone who could do this, then that person was definitely not a human, but a god. As long as he was alone, he would not be able to escape from Jean Luen Hui's attack. But once the target's position was found, no matter how well you hid, you would still be the focus of all the attacks. There was a loud explosion. Countless shockwaves shot out in all directions. Even the encirclement formed by Guhan and the rest of the three holy lands was blown away by the shockwaves of this attack, and had no choice but to scatter far away. As expected, the two swords completely disappeared in an instant. Jean Luen Hui, who was still in a sorry state, stood proudly in the center. His divine sense swept through the area, and he couldn't help but smile. That was the satisfied smile of a victor. This attack had basically achieved its intended goal. Although it was unable to completely destroy the Nether 14th young master, it had at least temporarily escaped from the entanglement of those two strange swords. Furthermore, it had completely destroyed the encirclement that the Heaven Saint Palace had set up. His chances of escaping had greatly increased. As long as he could escape, nothing else would be a problem. The tornado that was formed from the Heaven Mad Battle Dragon was still wreaking havoc in the world. After a while, it slowly converged, turning into a faint gray dragon beside Jean Luen Hui, twisting up and down. But Jean Luen Hui's body was abnormally clear as he stood in the void. His almost naked body did not look the slightest bit wretched at this moment, only exuding a domineering aura that looked down upon the heavens and earth. His eyes swept across Guhan and the rest emotionlessly. Without saying a word, he turned his gaze away. At this moment, the pitch-black spatial cracks that appeared due to the Heaven Mad Battle Dragons moved quietly, closed up, restoring the clear skies under the eruption of the volcano. That Heaven Mad Battle Dragon just now had blocked out everything in this world. This was truly the legendary move of the gods. Guhan and the rest of the experts from Heaven Saint Palace were ashen. Everyone had heard of how powerful the legendary Heaven Mad Battle Dragon was, but they had never imagined that it would be this powerful. Jean Luen Hui's strength had clearly reached a level that could shock the world. If this Heaven Mad Battle Dragon had been used on them, only 2 or 3 people would be able to escape, while the rest would all be lost in the spatial turbulence. Not to say that they would all be wiped out. And that indifferent look from Jean Luen Hui just now, although he did not say anything, but the deterrence and warning in it was obvious. Facing this enemy, they had gathered so many people, but they were powerless to stop him. In Jean Luen Hui's current situation, he clearly still had the energy to spare. He could use the Heaven Mad Battle Dragon again. Even the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters who had single-handedly pushed Jean Luen Hui into a disadvantageous position had vanished into thin air. The 2 swords that shone with a light that could illuminate the past and the present had now returned to nothingness. How could they fight against such a powerful enemy? Even if they had the heart to fight to the death, it was all futile. Far away, the volcano was still erupting with lava and flames. The terrifying consequences of Jean Luen Hui's actions were still ongoing. But facing Jean Luen Hui, everyone felt an inexplicable sense of helplessness. Jean Luen Hui laughed coldly, his hands behind his back as he floated forward. Guhan's body shook. Blazing sparks shot out of his eyes. That was the determination to fight with his life on the line. That cold laughter from Jean Luen Hui had undoubtedly ignited all the blood in his body. Kill. Even if we have to perish together with this bastard, we must not let him off. Guhan's eyes were bloodshot as he raised his arms and roared. Kill. A loud roar rang out. A total of over 50 top experts all charged towards Jean Luen Hui without a care for their own lives. Jean Luen Hui laughed coldly as he opened his arms. A ball of black light slowly formed in his hands. His long hair flew back, and his eyes shone fiercely. Since you 3 holy lands insist on seeking your own destruction, then I shall grant you your wish. Anyway, your juniors are basically all dead in this calamity. I shall send you off to reunite. Ha ha ha. Just as he was about to attack, another change had occurred. This change was beyond everyone's expectations. The brilliant sword light flashed again, and it was still the same resplendent sword light from before. This sword, there was no turning back once it was unleashed. With an indescribable sense of awe and determination, the sword pierced into Jean Luen Huey's chest with the force of a shooting star. At the same time, it also shattered the ball of light that had formed in his palms. Jean Luen Hui roared, but this sword did not stop at all. It continued to push forward with an extremely powerful force. In this instant, Jean Luen Hui had gathered all his xian qi on his chest. That sword had only entered 3 inches into his flesh before it was stopped by the crazy xian qi and could not go any further. But Jean Luen Huey's entire body was also unable to withstand such a powerful force. His entire back was protruding outwards. His head and feet were on a parallel line. Under the ferocious attack of this unstoppable sword, he rapidly retreated like a meteor chasing after the moon. In midair, a sword shot out thousands of cold rays, pushing a person back rapidly. In this instant, be it the sword or the person, they were both emitting thousands of rays of light. With a loud bang, an expert from Heaven's St. Palace struck Jean Luen Huey's back with his sword. But with a loud bang, he turned into minced meat. The sword also turned into metal shards, flashing in the air and disappearing without a trace. Such a flaw that could not be defended against had instead become a weapon that could kill the enemy. Jean Luen Huey's skills had truly reached an unbelievable height. Jean Luen Hui let out a deafening roar. He tried his best to stabilize his body that was rapidly retreating, but he was currently in mid-air. Although he could barely ensure that his body would not be pierced by this godlike and demonic sword, he had nowhere to borrow strength from. In the end, he was unable to resist the opponent's extremely ferocious impact. Guhan's eyes brightened. He was not afraid of the fact that one of his companions had died because he had interfered. Instead, he swung the sword in his hand, and with a loud roar, he stabbed Jean Luen Huey's chest. Similarly, he did not seek to kill the enemy, but to push him back. In this instant, Guhan had already understood the meaning of this 9 serenities and 14 masters. With Jean Luen Huey's profound skills, he had already reached a height that no human could kill. If he wanted to kill him, there was only another way. And right now, there was only one way to kill Jean Luen Hui, and that was to push this human scum into the crater of the volcano. The volcano was opened because of you, Jean Luen Hui. Then you, Jean Luen Hui, shall be buried by the volcano. Jean Luen Hui was pushed by 2 huge forces, gradually approaching the crater of the volcano. His eyes looked like they were about to spit out fire, as if he wanted to burn the world. But in this situation, he had already lost the initiative, and that godly move, the Heaven Mad Battle Dragon, had already gathered twice. He was powerless to strike again, and this was his weakest moment. Chapter 1125. The 2 long swords in his heart were like rocket propellers, pushing Jean Luen Hui with all their might, keeping his head and feet parallel to each other as he flew backwards at high speed. Like lightning, it was truly like a falling meteor, getting closer and closer to the crater of the volcano. Guhan used all his strength, pouring all his xian qi into his swords and pushing them. His robes were already starting to smoke, but his eyes were still resolute. His hatred was still there. Even if he had to perish together with this great calamity, Guhan would have no regrets. Jean Luen Hui could clearly feel the extreme heat that could melt gold and rock, burning everything, getting closer and closer. He couldn't help but howl in rage, but there was nothing he could do. In the dark, Jun Moxie gritted his teeth, continuing to push the blood of yellow flame in his hands. This old monster had already suffered no less than 1,000 sword attacks from him. But his own cultivation was not up to par yet, and there was no way he could kill him. If he wanted to kill him, this was indeed the only way. Within the Hongjun Pagoda, Mei Shui Yin continued to run and leap into the distance. Then, she flew back fiercely and slammed into Jun Mo's back. This repeated over and over again, and with every collision, Jun Mo's speed would increase. Xiao, with a sharp whistle, another Saint Venerable from Heaven's St. Palace flew over like a cannonball, slamming into Gu Han's back. This caused Gu Han's momentum to not weaken, and his speed to become even more ferocious. But although their methods were similar to Mei Shuiyan's, there was actually a fundamental difference. Mei Shuiyan could be considered the person who understood Jun Moxie's cultivation the best in the world. She had already calculated the amount of force that Jun Moxie could withstand and would not put too much of a burden on Jun Moxie. Furthermore, Jun Daxiao had been transformed by the Hongjun Pagoda several times. His physical body was so strong that it could be considered unparalleled in the world. He was also proficient in the technique of using Little Liang to move 1,000 jin. Although he had been hit many times, he had not been injured. But it was different for Gu Han's side. Gu Han had already poured all of his life's worth of cultivation into his saber, and his protective profound energy had already been lowered to its lowest point. But the Heaven Saint Palace expert who was charging at him from behind was afraid that he would not use his full strength, so he desperately rushed forward. Although he had succeeded in increasing the momentum of his charge, it had also caused Gu Han to sustain more and more injuries, and the burden on his body had inevitably become greater and greater. Gu Han spat out a mouthful of blood, but he still gritted his teeth and roared again. Gu Han hated Zhang Luan Hui to the core and felt that he had to be eliminated no matter if it was in the world, in the country, or in himself. He already had the intention to perish together with Zhang Luan Hui. Although his injuries were getting more and more serious, he did not care about his own safety at all and kept urging Zhang Luan Hui. With the continuous double impact, Zhang Luan Hui's body was less than 200 zhang away from the nearest volcano, and this kind of distance was almost to the core of the erupting volcano. Gu Han's clothes had already turned into ashes under the high temperature. His hair was also curling, emitting green smoke, and then turning into ashes and flying away. Zhang Luan Hui roared madly, blood spurting out of his mouth continuously. He had clearly used some kind of self-mutilating secret technique to raise his cultivation and resist with all his might, hoping that he could escape from this deadly predicament. He was getting closer and closer to the volcano, but his momentum was getting slower and slower. If this continued, Zhang Luan Hui might even be able to escape at the last moment before he entered the volcano. Although the temperature there was also a few thousand degrees, but with Zhang Luan Hui's skills, he would still be able to escape. Getting closer and closer, Jun Moxie, who was hidden in the void, finally revealed a look of anxiety on his face. Gu Han's face was filled with grief and indignation. The two of them, including Mei Shuiyan and the Hongjun Pagoda, had already given it their all, but right now, they had already entered a restricted area. The people behind them could no longer help. If they insisted on helping, no matter which one of them came, they would only end up losing their lives, because this place was too close to the volcano. If they acted rashly, they would not be helping, but sending themselves to death. Another 10 zhang. It was only 100 feet away, but the fiery red magma was right in front of him, almost within reach. It was still spewing furiously into the sky. At this time, there were already countless fiery red rocks falling from the sky, hitting Gu Han and Zhang Luan Hui. Gu Han's skin had already started to wrinkle and smoke, but Zhang Luan Hui's retreat had already been stopped. He slowly raised his head with all his might. The corners of his mouth cracked into a sinister smile, although his back was also starting to smoke. All the muscles on his body were almost roasted dry by the scorching lava, but in the end he stopped retreating. There was only a distance of 10 zhang. In the past, even an Earth Xian expert or Tian Xian would be able to reach this distance. But right now, it had become an insurmountable distance. Behind them, the experts from Heaven Saint Palace who had been following them with all their might also realized this. Instantly, several people jumped out in agitation. Just like Gu Han, they wanted Zhang Luan Hui dead. For this goal, they were willing to pay any price, including their own lives. One of them shouted, "Everyone stop fighting! Stop! Let me do it!" Without waiting for anyone to reply, he leaped up and bent his legs. "Quick! All the experts from Heaven's Saint Palace were filled with grief and indignation, tears rolling down their faces. But now is not the time to be sentimental. Everyone here had at least 1,000 years of experience. How could they not know that this was a critical moment? As long as there was a slight delay, even if it was in the blink of an eye, the situation would be reversed. There was no time to grieve. Everyone roared angrily with tears in their eyes. They gathered all their strength and unleashed it at the same time, landing a heavy blow on this person's legs. At the same time, this Saint Venerable's legs kicked back, borrowing the strength of everyone. He flew out like a cannonball, almost in midair. Because of the high temperature and the friction in the air caused by the high speed, he had already started to burn. He had turned into a ball of fire. Before Jean-Louis Huey's sinister smile could turn into shock, that person's body had already slammed into him with a loud bang. This Saint Venerable expert used all his strength to lock Jean-Louis Huey in place with his arms, wrapping around his body. This powerful and unstoppable force carried the two bundled-up bodies and Jean-Louis Huey's indignant howl as they crossed the last 100 feet of space and charged into the crater of the volcano. Fourth brother, Guhan screamed, feeling as though a knife was being twisted in his heart. As for Jun, Mo, Xie, and Guhan, they were still using all their strength. With Jean-Louis Huey's disappearance, Jun, Mo, Xie, and Guhan suddenly lost the huge resistance in front of them and fell towards the mouth of the volcano. They were about to be buried with them. Guhan closed his eyes, a smile on his face. To die like this, although there was still some regret, it was enough. Behind him, everyone exclaimed in shock. In the blazing light of the volcano, a figure flashed and Guhan disappeared. The entire world returned to silence. Everyone's hearts were filled with grief and agony. Although Jean-Louis Huey had died, he had also lost Guhan, and it seemed like that 9 serenities and 14 masters who had never appeared had also died here. Suddenly, with an almost heart-wrenching roar, a figure with bright red magma all over his body flew out of the crater at a high speed. With a heart-wrenching howl, his entire body flipped and tumbled down from the other side of the volcano. Then he completely disappeared. Jean-Louis Huey, he had clearly fallen into the volcano, but he still had the strength to jump out. Jean-Louis Huey, in the nick of time, did not hesitate to ignite his own soul, releasing the seal on his soul that had lasted for thousands of years. In that instant, he reached the pinnacle of his cultivation and finally charged out from the mouth of the volcano. But his physical body was destroyed. Although Jean Kuang's reincarnated soul did not dissipate, but Jean-Louis Huey's body could no longer be used. Jean-Louis Huey's soul was sealed because he was afraid that his current body would not be able to withstand the power of his soul and explode once it was released. But now, he had no other choice. If he didn't release the seal, only death awaited him. He had to choose the lesser of two evils. So he chose to release the seal and release Jean Kuang's original soul. Finally, he escaped the calamity of the volcano. Even so, Jean-Louis Huey had expended a lot of energy in this battle. Not only was his physical body destroyed, even his soul was half destroyed. Whether or not he could keep his life was still an unknown. In the midst of everyone's shock, they saw another figure flying out from the direction of the volcano, heading towards where they were. As they flew closer, they discovered to their surprise that this person was Guhan. Guhan, who was clearly going to die, was actually not dead, and his physical body did not suffer much damage. Because Jun Moxie did not reveal himself. Although the temperature of the volcano was high, it did not affect him much. So at the last moment, Jun Daxiao grabbed Guhan and threw him into the Hongjun Pagoda. Daxiao still had some sympathy for Guhan. Guhan had already harbored the conviction that he would die and closed his eyes to await his death. His wish having been fulfilled, he did not have too many regrets. Who knew that at the last instant when the extreme heat was about to reach him, the heat completely disappeared, and he seemed to have arrived in a strange space. He could not help but be shocked. He was about to open his eyes to look around, but he was already thrown out again. When he opened his eyes again, he realized that he was already surrounded by the people of Heaven's Saint Palace, less than 1,000 zhang away from the volcano. He had truly escaped death. In fact, the moment Zhang Luan Hui rushed out of the volcano, Jun Moxie had already flown over with the yin-yang escape. This battle with Zhang Luan Hui had given Jun Moxie too many warnings. Today's update is complete. Chapter 1126. There's actually an unkillable expert in this world. To think that there really is an unkillable expert in this world. Even with the sharpness of the blood of yellow flame that had been enhanced several times, it was still unable to break through his physical defenses. And this body was at most a body that Zhang Luan Hui had taken over, and not his original body. If he really recovered to his peak, what kind of terrifying level would he reach? This time, it was because he was too guilty and was in a hurry to escape, and was caught off guard by Jun Moxie's sudden interception. And he was able to obtain victory in the end, because everyone in Heaven's Saint Palace disregarded their own lives, and gave their all to help him. And Gu Han and the others disregarded their own lives to assist him. And he also had Mei Shuiyan's full support in the Hongjun Pagoda. And someone like Zhang Luan Hui was willing to destroy the countless lives of the Xian continent for the sake of the Zhan family. Such an ambitious person. If he was allowed to continue living in this world, it would undoubtedly be a huge disaster. If this person really wanted to become enemies with the evil monarch manor, no one in the entire evil monarch manor would be able to escape his pursuit other than himself. Even the mouth of the volcano could not take his life, and he could still jump out. This is 2F** King terrifying. And right now, the evil monarch manor had already completely offended the Zhan family. Zhang Luan Hui, this extremely powerful existence, had undoubtedly become a huge matter that could affect the final outcome of both sides. After witnessing Zhang Luan Hui's terrifying prowess, Jun Moxie was certain of one thing. If Zhang Luan Hui did not die, he would not be able to eat or sleep in peace. Right now, he was heavily injured, and his soul was about to be destroyed. This was a heaven-sent opportunity. Take his life while he's down. He rushed past the mouth of the volcano, rushing towards the place where Zhang Luan Hui had fallen. Below them was a sea of magma. It was the center of the 6 volcanoes that had erupted. This was originally a basin, but right now, it was filled with lava. Jun Moxie searched around the volcanoes for a long time before finally finding Zhang Luan Hui's corpse. How could they be sure that this body belonged to Zhang Luan Hui? This sudden calamity had already killed tens of thousands of people. The reason was simple. There were countless corpses drowned in the lava, but in this vast sea of lava, there was only one corpse left. Only a freak like Zhang Luan Hui, an undying old monster, could temporarily resist the invasion of the magma after his origin spirit left his body. At least it lasted until Jun Moxie found the skeleton. After searching through the corpse, Jun Moxie did not waste any time, stabbing the blood of yellow flame into the magma-covered skeleton. The blood of yellow flame let out a disappointed cry, leaping up listlessly. Jun Moxie sighed. Although there was nothing wrong with the body, the soul was gone. His corpse was just a shell. Even if it was thrown away, it would be useless except for staining the ground. Zhang Luan Hui. No, it should be said that Zhang Kuang's soul had already escaped. This time, it would be even harder to find him. No one would know which body the old monster Zhang Kuang would forcefully burrow his soul into. After the death of the Holy Emperor, there was a chance for a spirit seed to be born. After the death of a Saint Venerable, his soul would transform into a holy infant. Both of these could not be taken over directly. They could only choose to possess the body of a newborn baby. But Zhang Luan Hui's soul, which had surpassed the level of experts in this world, had already surpassed the above category and could be taken over directly. And this soul could still retain a considerable amount of battle power. As long as it was given some time, its strength would increase tremendously. In the cultivation world, This kind of situation would be known as a loose immortal. And if the body that he took over was not bad, he would have the chance to make a comeback and reach the peak again. Jun Moxie let out a long sigh. With such a coincidence, such a heaven-sent opportunity, in such an advantageous situation, it was truly a great pity that he was still unable to completely eliminate this most terrifying enemy. But since things had already come to this, there was nothing more he could do. With a thought, he disappeared into that boundless sea of lava. The surviving experts of the 3 holy lands looked at each other, all in a state of great surprise and worry. The surprise was that an almost invincible and undefeatable enemy like Zhang Lunhui had died just like that. The worry was that now that the 3 holy lands were almost annihilated, how are they going to deal with the war for seizing the heavens later? It could even be said that the war for seizing the heavens no longer had much meaning, because the pillar of heaven's mountains had already collapsed and the natural barrier was no longer there. The strange races could invade the Xian continent. With the strange race's personality, did they really hope that they would abide by the agreement and fight the war for seizing the heavens? Were they really going to become the greatest sinners of history? After the joy of defeating a powerful enemy, everyone looked at the volcanoes that were still spewing flames in a daze. Everyone's hearts were in a mess. Just at this time, a figure flashed before them. A white-robed youth appeared before them. Chu Hui's eyes narrowed. Jun Moxie. The others also recognized this audacious youth who had almost fought with them on Mount Heaven Saint. Everyone's memory is really good, Jun Mo Xie boasted shamelessly. Then, his face turned serious, and he asked, "Is there anyone who can tell me what exactly happened here? How did the pillar of heaven's mountains become like this?" As he said that, he gestured at the volcanoes around them. "Isn't it all because of Zhang Lunhui, that damned bastard?" Cheng Yin Xiao sighed and suddenly rolled his eyes. "You've come at the right time, We just finished our battle with Zhang Lunhui, and you're already here. Have you been watching from aside? Was that battle exciting?" Hearing Cheng Yin Xiao's words, everyone's faces turned ugly. Everyone was well aware of how dangerous that battle was. Jun Moxie's appearance was so coincidental that it was impossible for it to be just a coincidence. The battle earlier could be said to be earth-shattering. Even if Jun Moxie was really on his way here, once he sensed that shocking aura, he would definitely have rushed to the scene to understand the situation. There was no way he would be late. Could it be that this lad had really been watching from the sidelines, hoping that both sides would be heavily injured so that he could reap the benefits? Jun Moxie pursed his lips and snorted coldly. "Watch from aside? Exciting?" This seat did want to watch from aside, but the show that you guys put on was not exciting at all. So I had no choice but to do it myself. If not for this seat's exciting performance, not to mention keeping Zhang Lunhui here, all of you would have died in that volcano. Jun Mo Xie sneered as he finished speaking. He then flipped his wrist, and an awe-inspiring sword appeared in his hand. It flickered with a cold flame. As soon as the sword appeared, a disdainful, arrogant, and condescending aura immediately appeared in the world. It was as if all the experts in the world were as insignificant as ants in front of this sword. It was the demon-like Imperial Void Divine Blade, the sword that had attacked Zhang Lunhui earlier. It was also the divine sword that had forced Zhang Lunhui into the mouth of the volcano with a single sword. Then, Jun Moxie flipped his left hand, and another cold black blade appeared in his hand. It blinked coldly, as if a soul was sighing softly. It was the 9 Nether Frost blade. Could it be that the one who fought with Zhang Lunhui earlier was not the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, but you, Jun Moxie? Everyone exclaimed in disbelief, their faces alternating between red and white. So the other party was the main force of this battle, the key person in killing Zhang Lunhui. And they were the ones who did not contribute much. And now they were accused of being the one who had contributed the most, watching from the side. This was not a small misunderstanding. In that moment, all the experts were too ashamed to show their faces. They were not Mo Wudao. Their skin was not so thick. Forget it. Let's not talk about these meaningless things. Let's go down and talk. At this crucial moment, June Moxie did not take things too far and said lightly, "After chasing for such a long time, even though all of them possessed peerless strength, they still felt a little tired. In particular, the exhaustion of their mental strength was even more severe. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they were both mentally and physically exhausted. Most importantly, this place was really not a good place to talk. Under June Moxie's suggestion, everyone moved out of the radius of the volcano. Although it was still extremely hot outside, with everyone's strength, it was no longer a burden. The remaining experts of the Heaven Saint Palace all had extremely ugly expressions on their faces. They looked at each other. In that moment, no one knew what to say. With a sigh, Guhan, who was on the brink of death, struggled to stand up. Panting heavily, he said, "Manor Lord June, I believe you have seen the current situation clearly. The situation is extremely grim, so this old man will not say any courteous words of gratitude. I can only briefly explain what Manor Lord June is most interested to know." June Moxie nodded. A figure flashed, and Mei Shuyan suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Everyone was shocked once again. They could not understand how the evil monarch was able to conceal himself and participate in the battle. And now they saw the Lord of Tian Fa, Mei Shuyan, suddenly appear in such a strange manner. But everyone knew that this was not the time to be shocked. They could only forcefully suppress it. But the bewilderment in their eyes was obvious. Mei Shuyan had been concealing herself in the Hongjun Pagoda the entire time. Although she had some understanding of the outside world, it was not accurate. Now that she saw everyone's miserable state, although she was mentally prepared, she was still shocked. But under June Moxie's gaze, she forcefully suppressed it. Behind everyone, Qiao Ying stood silently. Her eyes were lifeless, and her face was pale. Only when she saw June Moxie for the first time did her eyes brighten for a moment. But after that, they dimmed again. For more than 1,000 years, Qiao Ying had been in charge of all the spirit herbs, spirit roots, and spirit sprouts of Heaven Saint Palace, including the exquisite lotus. It could be said that these precious plants were all of Qiao Ying's spiritual sustenance. But now, all of them had been destroyed. It was equivalent to destroying all of Qiao Ying's spiritual sustenance for the past 1,000 years. Chapter 11:27. Seeing that everyone had sat down, she subconsciously followed them and sat down. However, her eyes were empty, as if she no longer existed. Guhan sucked in a deep breath. His entire body glowed with light, and the strange colors of his profound energy lit up from black, then red, green, all the way until it became a colorless jade color. After flashing dozens of different colors, he finally spat out a mouthful of thick black blood with a PU sound. Then his damaged and festering skin and the charred half of his body slowly fell off his body bit by bit. After the scars fell off, what was revealed was white and tender new flesh. If it was an ordinary person, they would have died countless times from such serious injuries. However, he had completely recovered in such a short time. At least on the surface, there were no major problems. His injuries were no longer serious, but his appearance was. Previously, Old Man Gu had cooperated with June Moxie to force Jean Luan to fall back into the mouth of the volcano. He had exerted all his martial arts into the impact, causing his defense to fall to the lowest point. His clothes and whatnot were all burnt, but even his hair and eyebrows were damaged. Just now, he was in a sorry state and was covered in soot. But now that his body had recovered, his fair and tender skin was not bad. But now that his flesh was exposed, it was a different story. Jun Dashao rejoiced in his heart. When he first saw this old man, he had the demeanor of an immortal and had a graceful bearing. He really had the supreme elegance of an otherworldly expert. But now, he was in such a sorry state. Thinking quickly, he took out an outer robe and handed it over. Guhan took it subconsciously and suddenly realized something. His face turned red, and he hurriedly put on the robe. His injuries had recovered, but his appearance was very unsightly. It was no different from Jean Luan Huey's appearance. Although it was an emergency and a man should not be bothered by trifles, there were women present, It was not that the people of Heaven's St. Palace did not think of this, but they were unable to carry a world with them like Jundashao and could take out clothes at any time. If they wanted to give clothes, they could only give out their own clothes, and they were also riddled with holes. Zhang Kuang. The main culprit behind this disaster is Zhang Kuang. Guhan suddenly spat out a breath of air, gritting his teeth as he said, Zhang Kuang is the ancestor of the Zhang clan of the 8 great clans of the Misty Mansion. At the same time, he is also one of the 8 great disciples of the first-generation master of the Misty Mansion, Miao Qingqing. He is the only one left alive. Jun Moxie nodded and said, Yes, what is the source? Guhan snorted, his face twitching. Everything started from greed. In these 10,000 years, ever since the Misty Mansion was established, it has been inextricably linked to the 3 Holy Lands. Back then, when the first young master sealed the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and divided the continent into 2 regions, in order to support the seal, he set up a 9 illusory, quicksand nirvana formation in the ancestral hall of the 3 Holy Lands, absorbing the heaven and earth ling qi to form the 9 illusory quicksand. Then, the 9 illusory quicksand was used to maintain the natural operation of the formation, continuously producing the energy needed to seal the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. This was to ensure that the strange races would never be able to easily step into the Xian continent. 9 illusory quicksand, nirvana formation. Jun Moxie muttered. So that's how it is. And the reason why the Misty Mansion was able to be formed was because of the 9 illusory divine pearls passed down by the first young master. That was also a mysterious heaven and earth formation, moving heaven and earth into a mustard seed, moving the sun and moon into a small space. That was how the Misty Mansion was formed. But if the Misty Mansion wanted to continue existing, every 1,000 years, a certain amount of 9 illusory quicksand had to be poured into the eye of the formation. Once it was interrupted, it meant that the entire realm of the Misty Mansion would collapse. Guhan let out a deep sigh. And today's calamity is because of this. Jun Moxie was completely enlightened. If the eye of the formation in the Misty Mansion was not able to receive the supply of 9 illusory quicksand, the source of life of the Misty Mansion, the Rainbow Holy Tree, would wither and die in a short period of time. If the Rainbow Holy Tree died, the entire Misty Mansion, along with all the life within, would also turn into dust. Guhan said solemnly. Back then, the 9 Nether First Young Master was also worried that the 3 Holy Lands would have evil intentions and purposely destroyed the Misty Mansion. So although this 9 illusory, quicksand nirvana formation was set up within the boundaries of the Holy Lands because of the seal of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the necessary maintenance and operation of this formation must be handled by the people of the Misty Mansion. He raised his head to look at Jun Moxie, knowing that he did not understand. Back then, the 9 Nether First Young Master had passed down a set of special Xian skills, but he changed it later on and finally gave one set to each of his 4 disciples. But the effects of the Xian skills that they received were different. Among them, only the divine skill passed down by Senior Miao Qingqing of the Misty Mansion can truly activate the 9 illusory, quicksand nirvana formation. And only those with the cultivation of a saint venerable and above can activate it. Jun Moxie nodded his head silently. This was the best way to cooperate and rely on each other. And this 9 illusory, quicksand nirvana formation, other than having the effect of maintaining the seal of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, is also extremely powerful. Experts below the Saint Venerable level are completely unable to enter. Even if it's a Saint Venerable, once they enter, no matter how powerful their Xian skills are, the moment they enter, not even 1 in 1,000 will remain. It's equivalent to an ordinary person. And with the strength of an ordinary person, the amount of 9 illusory quicksand that they can bring out each time is just enough for 1,000 years. Maybe a little more, but definitely not much more. Jun Moxie took in a deep breath. He suddenly felt a heartfelt respect for the 9 Nether First Young Master. This arrogant number 1 madman, since the beginning of time, was extremely thoughtful, for his disciples and disciples. Such a plan was undoubtedly close to perfection. Not only did it suppress the evil intentions of the three Holy Lands, but also cut off the possibility of the Misty Mansion's plan of remaining independent. Thus, they could coexist in peace for a long time. No wonder the three Holy Lands could stand for 10,000 years without collapsing. So the real reason for all this was because of this 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation. The Misty Mansion would specially come over to retrieve it every 1,000 years to ensure the smooth operation of the 9 illusory quicksand formation. At the same time, the Misty Mansion's own operation of the 9 illusory quicksand had never changed in these 10,000 years, and there had never been any accidents. And because of this layer of interdependence, the three Holy Lands had reached a tacit understanding with the Misty Mansion. Every time the Misty Mansion came, they would bring 2 sets of 7 colored holy fruits, and the Holy Lands would gift them 2 stalks of exquisite lotus. You could say it's an exchange, or you can say it's reciprocity. 10,000 years passed just like that. Just a few days ago, that Zhan Luan Hui, the reincarnation of Zhan Kuang, suddenly came to Mount Heaven Saint to seek an audience with this old man. He said that the war for seizing the heavens is just around the corner, and he was afraid that it would disturb the Holy Land's preparations for the war for seizing the heavens. So he specially came here to maintain the formation. At the same time, he also took back this 1,000-year 9 illusory quicksand. Jun Moxie raised his eyebrows, a questioning look on his face. Guhan smiled bitterly. You don't have to doubt it. The deadline of 1,000 years has yet to arrive. Zhan Luan Hui's arrival was indeed sudden. However, ever since the collapse of the Pillar of Sky Mountains 8,000 years ago, it had a huge impact on the 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation. In recent years, the seal of the Pillar of Sky Mountains would show signs of loosening from time to time. Now that the war for seizing the heavens is just around the corner, and the strength of our three Holy Lands is currently too weak, so we don't have the confidence to win. In fact, we might even be completely annihilated in this battle. Zhan Luan Hui's arrival at this time also gave us a thought. That is, even if we all die in this battle, this 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation can still be sustained for at least another 1,000 years. Even if the strange races can invade the Xian continent, only the most powerful experts can enter the Xian continent. At the same time, we also believe that the Misty Mansion would not sit by and watch their lifeline fall into the hands of outsiders. For a long period of time, even if the three Holy Lands are on the decline, the Misty Mansion will still take the initiative to defend this place. So after some discussion, we agreed to Zhan Luan Hui's request. At that time, we still did not know that he was the Zhan Kuang of the past. Although he also revealed the strength of a 4th-level Saint Venerable, we did not take it to heart. Guhan smiled bitterly. Our strength may not be considered extremely high, but we are still more than enough to deal with a 4th-level Saint Venerable. Even if he really wanted to play tricks, we would be able to stop him in time. But who could have expected? Guhan's face flushed red, and he coughed violently. Who could have expected that this Zhan Luan Hui was actually the ancestor of the Misty Mansion's Zhan family, Zhan Kuang? Zhan Kuang was deranged, relying on the fact that his strength had long surpassed that of a Saint Venerable, Saint Monarch, and was almost at the level of a saint. The 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation had a negligible effect on him. He actually forcefully collected a large amount of 9 illusory quicksand in the 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation. The accumulation of 10,000 years. He actually took away all of it in one go. Not a single bit was left. When he said this, everyone from Heaven's Saint Palace clenched their fists tightly, their faces filled with grief and indignation. Guhan paused for a moment, his gaze turning solid. The 9 illusory quicksand that Zhan Kuang took away was enough to supply the Misty Mansion for at least 1,000,000 years. Zhan Kuang is truly the disciple that 4th Master Miao is most proud of. He is indeed farsighted. This move is truly a one-off. But after he took away all of the 9 illusory quicksand, the Nirvana formation could no longer operate. There was no way to gather enough 9 illusory quicksand to operate the 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation in a day or two. Guhan smiled bitterly. Without the 9 illusory quicksand, how can it still be called the 9 illusory quicksand nirvana formation? Just as Zhang Kuang came out, the pillar of heaven's mountains suddenly showed signs of collapsing. This old man knew that something was wrong and asked Zhang Kuang, "What did you do in there?" Guhan's face twitched. At that time, Zhang Kuang explained that after the reinforcement of the formation, the seal of the pillar of heaven's mountains would be even stronger than before. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.